Cheers, man. For the thumbnail on YouTube.
Cheers, buddy.
Dude, it's so good to see you after 12 years.
You too, man. My first podcast ever as well.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
If it makes you feel any better, it's like my 16th. I'm kind of figuring this out as well myself.
Well, you've been doing a great job so far. I've listened to, I think, 3 of yours or 2 of yours. I've seen Basil, I've seen Yazan. I think I've seen something else, but I can't remember.
Yeah, man, listen, it's been a great experience. The whole thing started out of boredom and like an existential crisis that I was having about like, okay, what do I do with my life? Like I have a good, like my income's fine, but I'm kind of bored, kind of like to chat with people. I started listening to podcasts. It all happened in COVID. And that's like probably the best thing it's just a small podcast still, but just the way I spend my time on the podcast is probably one of the best decisions I've made.
Yeah.
So shout out to Basil Abu Rub. So cheers, because I think Basil, guys, like where's he? I don't know where he's going to see us. I know he's a guy who's kind of reintroduced
Cheers,
us to each other again.
So which camera is this one? This one is the middle one, right?
Yeah, you're looking at this one right here.
All right.
I'm looking at this one.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, Basil. And I have to switch cameras myself too. I don't have like a Jamie like Joe Rogan has or anything. So
Eventually.
One day, yeah. Because he reintroduced us to each other. We used to party like 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit of context for people who are listening and watching. Basil Basil is into this thing called human design. And I only heard about it from Basil, about like 9 months ago. And I was like, what the hell is human design? And he started to explain to me, but he's like, dude, you just got to get Fares on your podcast and he's going to tell you all about it. So for anybody who doesn't know what human design is, like I didn't, and I still don't know much about it. So that's why you're here today. It's a form of relating who you are as a person with the universe. I think there's some element of that in it. Your birth date is involved. Look, so my first reaction was, is that like astrology, but a little bit thought more forward?
Well, I mean, they do call it the new astrology.
Okay.
So it is very much similar to astrology in that sense. But it's what I find interesting about it is that it combines a few different traditional or old schools of thought with new science, and so there's a bit of a backing of science. Namely, it's based on the Kabbalah tree of life, the Hindu chakra system, and the Chinese I Ching, which is a mathematical, I guess, calculation system based on the 64 gates of the moon. And so this is the old traditional science that's behind it. Not that you can call it science, I guess, but it's a pseudoscience. And then the scientific part is based on quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and the study of something called neutrinos, which is so we used to think until the year 1995, we used to think that the lowest thing that we can zoom into in a cell was an atom. And after that, quantum mechanics and quantum physics discovered that there's subatomic particles, and part of these subatomic particles, there's something called a neutrino. And essentially a neutrino, and I hope I'm not butchering this, I'm in no way an expert on the subject, but this is my understanding of the matter, is that a neutrino is essentially everything at its core, as far as we know, is a neutrino. And it's essentially a vibration.
Mm-hmm.
It's the energy that makes up everything physical in life, everything material in life. And neutrinos are essentially, they call them the breath of the stars. So they're emitted by any living star in our solar system all the time, and they're traveling through the solar system near the speed of light. And basically, because we live on Earth, the biggest star in our vicinity is the sun. So 70% of the neutrino cocktail that we're exposed to at the moment of birth or at any time comes from the sun. And that's what's referred to as your sun sign in astrology.
Like the 12 different ones?
Like your February is Aquarius, for example. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Go continue.
But that makes up only 70% of your personality. Basically, the remaining 30% depends on the placement of the other planets at the moment of birth, at the exact location where you were born.
Okay, so let's unpack this for a little, just to make sure I understand this. So 70%, first of all, human design is meant to be a discipline, a modality, or a framework that tells you about yourself. The reason being is that when you know a little bit more about yourself, based on all of this, which we'll unpack in a second, so you're able to make better decisions according to how you are. Is this like
well, essentially, it's think of it as the energetic blueprint of your body, of your vessel, and how you're meant to operate in this world.
Okay.
And if you learn about your human design and you follow it, you essentially should be able to live the most fulfilling version of your life and enter a flow where everything, hopefully, in life works out for you.
Wow.
That's the idea, yeah.
All right, so now we're going to get into how that works and the pseudoscience versus the science in a minute. But you were saying that this framework, 70% of it is based on some Eastern philosophies, quantum, and what you call the neuro. What is it? The
neutrinos is the scientific part.
Is scientific part, and
neutrinos, these are the subatomic particles,
right?
And then the Eastern is the Kabbalah tree of life, the what do you call it? The Hindu chakra system, and the Chinese I Ching.
Okay, and the quantum is like a part of the neutrinos one, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Exactly, because I mean, anything at the particle level for me is part of quantum, and I actually happen to know a little bit about that. So cool. So 70% of the overall human design thing is based on what you just mentioned, the quantum part and the Eastern philosophies, the three of them.
Well, I mean, actually all of it. But what I was saying is that the 70% relates to the neutrino exposure.
Oh, okay.
And this is why not every Aquarius is the same, or not every Libra is the same.
But the location of where somebody's born and all of that, is it the 30% or 70%, or is it a separate?
No, so the whole thing is based on the location. So basically, living in they say in any square meter of space, there's about 2 to 3 trillion neutrinos. Okay. And that neutrino cocktail is an outcome of, because it's the birth of the stars, it's an outcome of the placement of all the planets at that any given moment in a specific location.
Right.
So let's say you were born in Amman, for example, then on whatever February 11th, 1985, it just happens to be that the sun contributed to the neutrino cocktail that was there, and then if Mercury was in the way, for example, it contributed a certain element of that neutrino cocktail that you were exposed to at the moment of birth.
Okay, cool.
And that makes an imprint on you that forms your conscious personality.
Okay, cool. All right, so because I'm sure that we're not going to be able to go into every single element of it, I don't plan to do that, but basically I understand now the components that make up the overall framework and what are the inputs to it. So then you look at some of those things, the stars and the neutrino density, or however we want to look at it, along with the other Eastern philosophies that you mentioned, the chakras and all of that. And then there is I think at the time when Basil actually generated a report for me, and he paid for it, I think $19. So, and I haven't looked at it, but I think if I remember correctly, there was like generator, manifestor. So there was some form of classification, and I think this is just two of them, of the different profiles or archetypes, whatever you want to call it, that come out of it, right? So,
well, okay. So there's basically three main components. There's a little bit more than that, but there are three main components, which is your energy type, which is what you're referring to: generator, manifesting generator, projector, reflector, and manifestor. So these are the 5 different types. And then you have the authority. So every person has an authority, which is your guiding, your compass, your internal compass. And that's what you're supposed to use to make decisions, or the best decisions for you. And then there's your personality or your profile, which is, in your case, for example, is a 5-1. So the 5-1 is made up of 2 components: your conscious personality, which is a 5, and your unconscious personality, which is a 1.
Okay.
Your conscious personality is mainly a result of the neutrino imprint at the moment of birth.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to unpack a bit of that, basically,
and what's the scale of this 5 and 1, right? What's the range?
So there's 1 to 6. There's 6 different lines.
Okay.
1 being the youngest line and 6 being the wisest or the eldest line, let's say. Although there's no good or bad in human design, it's just your type, and it's all about knowing your type and understanding your type and how, what resonates with you and how to enter flow, as I said earlier. So the most important thing, arguably, in human design is your energy type. Okay. And in your case, it's a projector.
Okay.
So to give you a brief breakdown of these different types, generators,
Sorry, just one pause, because for people who are listening and watching, you have looked at the report that has
Yes.
been generated for me. So you know I am a projector after looking at the report, right?
Just now, exactly.
Yeah, so there's a PDF report that you've looked at, and that has in it this analysis of me,
Yes.
right? No good, no bad. It is, and it says I'm a projector, right?
Yes.
So let's continue with this example.
So
Sorry to interrupt.
It might be
you.
a good idea for us to open
Pull it
that.
up.
Pull it up,
Yeah,
just the
absolutely.
chart so that people know what we're talking about.
Do you remember which page it was on?
It's the picture. Just scroll down. It should be early on.
By the way, I mean, if anybody's watching, there's like a really cool cover page to this report, which is 24 pages long. So like just right off the bat, this is pretty cool. Like that there is something that is based on everything you said that happens to have this level of detail. Is this
Yes,
the image?
that's it.
Okay.
So the beauty of human design is that it is, I mean, I guess they don't call it a science yet. It's a pseudoscience, but it is extremely specific. So no matter who reads your chart is going to give you the same outcome, whether you use this website or another website. It doesn't require any kind of gift or talent or anything like that.
It's a consistent
purely,
framework.
yeah, very consistent.
Yeah.
And basically for based on that neutrino cocktail, you have these two numbers. So one side is black, the one on the right, and then the left side is red. The black side is your conscious personality, and that's based on your moment of birth, on the neutrino imprint. And the red side is the unconscious.
Okay.
Okay, and that's more based on your ancestry and your genetic inheritance.
Wow. And so the location is the location and the time of when I was born is on the right.
Mm-hmm.
And
the one on the left is determined 88 degrees prior to the moment of birth, so about 3 months.
okay. And that has to do more with my ancestry.
That has to do more with your ancestry, with your bloodline, and your genetics, basically.
Okay.
Now, it's also when they believe that, I think in spirituality, they believe that this is when the soul enters the body, 3 months before birth.
Oh, wow.
Enters the
Like
embryo, I guess.
The embryo, yeah, the human in that's cooking inside.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow. Okay. All right. So then energy type is the 5 classifications that you gave, right? So there's a manifestor, generator, and then a combination of them.
So manifestor and generator and manifesting generator are 70% of the population.
Oh, okay.
Combined, right? So generators are 37%, and manifesting generators are 32%.
Okay.
So combined, they're around 70%. That's the majority of the world.
Okay.
These are the builders of the world. These are the energy types that are meant to give energy to the universe. They're meant to produce energy and give it to the world.
Okay.
That's their role energetically. And then you have the projectors, which is what you are, and these are 20% of the population, and they're meant to be the ones to direct. So they have a bird's eye view, and they are able to direct people on how to best utilize their energy.
Okay.
That's their gift. That's their contribution to the world.
Okay.
And then you have manifestors, which are about 8% of the population. And these are the ones that are meant to initiate change. These trigger people to make things happen around them.
Right. Okay.
So these are, in the past, they were the leaders of churches and the leaders, essentially.
Right. So these are the manifestors.
The manifestors,
Right.
and they're 8% of the population.
Yeah.
And then you have the reflectors, which are the rarest type. They're 1% of the population.
Okay.
And these are supposed to act as mirrors that help us see or understand ourselves better. Now, I haven't done a lot of readings to reflectors, so it's probably the energy type that I understand the least.
Yeah.
Because they're so rare. I've only come across 2 in my life, and I've
2 individuals.
2 individuals.
Right.
Yeah, and I've done it on a lot of people.
But then the distribution of these people based on those percentages, is it based on some sort of like birth rate based on months that happens to have more people, or location?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
But basically, the way you read the chart is, so there are 64 gates in a human design chart, okay? And some of these gates are going to be turned on, and some of them are going to be turned off. Whenever a gate is turned on, so it's colored in, then there's a channel that's attached to it. Half of that channel becomes completed. And that color, whether it's black or red, depends on whether it's in your unconscious chart or your conscious chart. So if you pull up your chart, I'll tell you.
Yeah. I can go down as well, or is this the right page?
This is the right page. But let's say...
if it's too small for you, you can look at it on your phone.
I'll look at it on my phone. So,
while you're doing this, I'm just going to skim through the pages to see there's like a whole, like, for anybody who's listening, I am looking at a PDF of my human design PDF report that is 24 pages long. There are paragraphs there, I mean, that have been generated. I mean, for me, any sort of psychoanalyzing somebody in whatever lens you look at it from, in my opinion, is absolutely mind-blowing, because there is a thought process that went through. I mean, it could be right, it could be wrong. We can have this debate all day long, but this is like, there is a thought process that's going on here. So you want to go back to the first page, or?
Yeah. If you can go back to the first page. And by the way, everything in this report is probably no more than 20% of the information that is in your chart.
So this everything we're looking right now, this human body that has numbers.
No, the entire 24-page report. This is not full. This is just a preview.
Oh, okay. So, but what we're talking about right now, the 5 types, the manifestor generator, and all of that is within the scope of this 24-page report.
Yes.
And you're saying that 80% of human design has to do with something you haven't even mentioned up until now?
Yeah. Oh, nothing. Right now, I've mentioned like 2%.
Oh my God. All right. We're going to be here for a while. I'm down.
I don't know how to give you a full reading, but if you were to get a full reading, there's a lot of details.
Okay.
Every gate represents something. Every channel, which is 2 gates that are connected to each other. So let's go back to that for a second.
Yeah.
So in your chart, for example, so these 9 centers, the triangles, the squares that are in there are essentially your chakra systems. But human design believes that the Hindu chakra system is based on a 7-centered being that has 7 chakras, whereas in human design, they believe that there was a cosmic shift in the year 1781 when humanity moved from survival mode into creative mode. And we developed 2 extra centers, 2 extra chakra centers, which are not covered by by the Hindu chakra system, because it was developed way before. So these 2 centers basically moved us from the state of survival into the state of creation, where life became, or the universe became, about us fitting into a grander puzzle and working together. Okay, and so, for example, when we were in survival mode, our mind was always our authority. We just needed to use our mind to make decisions because we were in survival mode. So cavemen, for example, they had to decide, do we hunt at night or during the day? Of course, it makes more sense to hunt during the day. And that's how they made their decisions.
Yeah.
Now, after 1781, when humanity moved into creative mode, we developed these 2 extra centers, and every person makes decisions differently. So, for example, you have a splenic authority.
Okay, what's that?
It means that you should use a splenic authority is basically, you have an intuition, a very developed intuition, where you have a sense, and the difference between a spleen and a gut. I have, for example, a sacral authority, which is a gut. A gut is always there. You kind of feel it in your stomach. Whereas a spleen is more, it's like a soft whisper that you hear, or it's in your senses almost. You can feel it in your bones.
Wow. Bro, you're blowing my mind. It's like a nuanced version of a gut feeling. Like, not all gut feelings are the same. Is that what you're telling me? Like,
well, no, a gut feeling is always there. It's in your stomach.
Okay.
An instinct or an intuition is almost, it's a lot softer. It's like a soft whisper, and it comes for a second. And if you miss it, it doesn't come back.
So as a projector, I have that?
As a projector with a splenic authority, not all projectors have splenic authority, but as a projector with a splenic authority, you have that. So your internal compass should be that instinct, and you should rely on it more. So sometimes you might meet someone and just immediately feel like their vibe is off and it's not for you, and you should trust that.
Wow.
Or you might walk into a place, a restaurant, for example, and something just tells you that something smells weird, or it just doesn't feel right for you. You should trust that as well.
This is so not all projectors have that particular authority, which you refer to as the splenic. But I, as a projector, have it. And you're saying that this is because my date of birth, my report showed that I was a projector who also happens to have this splenic.
Well, no. So basically, your time of birth is going to determine the gates that are on and are off.
Oh, okay. We're talking about the gates, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Once a gate is on, so if you have 2 adjacent gates that are on at the same time, then you have a channel where energy can flow between these 2 gates. So, for example, in yours, if you look at your mind and your throat, So the triangle, if you can pull up that chart, I'll show you. So the mind over there, which is
6, 4, 6,
so the
1.
top one is, let's define them first. The top one is your crown, and that is undefined.
The crown chakra.
You can see it, it's white. Right? The one below it is the mind, or the anja center, and that's defined. Okay, and I'll explain what undefined and defined means. The one below it is your throat, and that's also defined.
Okay.
And the one below it is your identity center, the undefined one, that little square.
Okay.
And then next to it to the right is your ego center, or your heart.
20 starts with 21.
Yes, exactly. And that is defined. And then below the identity, that square over there is your sacral center. That's your sacral chakra.
Okay.
And it's undefined.
Yeah.
To the right of it, you have your emotional center, and it's also undefined. And to the left of it, you have your splenic center, your spleen, and that's defined. That's why you have splenic authority.
Okay.
And below that, at the bottom, is your root chakra, and that's defined. Now, the definition in these chakras, each one has a significance, and we can get into that in a second. But basically, just to explain to you how you have this composition,
right?
If you zoom in on the top one, the one in the mind,
the one in the mind, which is the triangle, or the green triangle.
It's the green triangle. If you zoom. Okay, so you see number 17.
Yeah, right here.
See, that gate is on. That's why there's a black line below it. You see it? There's a black line coming out of the 17, half a line.
I actually don't see it, half a line.
This one.
Like, okay. That little so
these are channels that connect the different centers to each other.
That little like pixel here?
No. The big.
Oh, this but okay. So there's a black bar underneath 17.
Exactly. That
okay,
one,
because
bar.
I want to make sure everybody listening. So we're looking at a human being figure in my human design report that has in it the chakras with geometric shapes, triangles, squares. Some of them are colored, some of them are not, and then each one of those shapes has numbers in them. And so apparently, for my report, which we're using as an example, I have the number 17 and a black, like what looks like a vein underneath it. Like, right? Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Exactly. And why is that number 17? So that gate number 17 is switched on. That's why there's a line coming out of it.
Okay.
And it's switched on in your conscious side. So your conscious personality. That's why it's a black line, not a red line. If it was in your unconscious, it would be a red line.
Oh, okay. Because there's these two lists on the right and the left on that says conscious and unconscious. Okay. Yeah. And so what's defined and undefined?
So now zoom in a little bit more. The one next to it, number 43, you see that line 43 to the bottom of the green triangle?
Right here.
Okay. So that channel is also turned on. That's why there's a line below it. The bar below it is complete, if you can zoom in.
Oh.
And the adjacent channel 23 is also turned on. So you have a complete...
Oh, from 43 to 23, there is a full solid line that connects them.
Exactly. So gate 43 and gate 23 are both on. So because they're two adjacent gates, now you have a channel formed.
Wow. Okay. And I still don't even know what these numbers...
So what does that mean? That means that energy can flow between these two chakras because there's a defined channel.
Okay. And so on 11, am I lacking because it's white or whatever the 11 is?
No. It's not a lack, but this is just how energy flows between your chakras.
No, lacking it. Am I is there like a lack of whatever 11 is? Is this gate on? Is this gate off?
The gate's off.
The gate's off because it's white. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's white, the gate's off.
Okay.
See, I mean, I wanted to show you these because on these, it's a lot more clear. You see the circles around them?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a similar visualization, but it allows you to interpret it easier.
Yeah.
Okay, on your phone. If you want to send it to me on WhatsApp. Yeah, I can pull it up. All right, here we go.
Okay, so it's a lot clearer here if you can see.
That's actually my report. So you've a different report? What's
that's a different app that just shows you the chart. It doesn't give you a report. It just shows you the chart, but it's a better representation. Visually. It's the same chart.
Okay.
It's exactly the same chart, except this one clearly shows you the gates that are on and that are off. So you can see that the 43 has a circle around it. It's the same numbers.
Yeah.
The 11's also,
right.
undefined.
Okay. So, you were saying, what's the definition of defined and undefined?
So, depending on that moment of birth, you have certain gates out of the 64 gates that are in human design that are switched on or switched off.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. If a gate is switched on, then energy can flow through it.
Okay.
If an adjacent gate is switched on, then now that channel can transport energy from one chakra to another. So these two chakras become colored in.
Okay.
So the reason, for example, your crown chakra is not colored in is because there are no gates. So the 64, 61, and 63 are all turned off at the top.
Yeah, well, there's one half full, but yeah, fine.
Yeah, but if the 63 was turned on as a gate, then that entire center will be turned on, because now energy can flow between your mind and your crown.
Wow. So these do act like some sort of vessels of energy or veins or whatever I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. So
now that definition, based on the gates, determines which centers are defined and which are undefined. Okay. So in your case, your mind is defined, your throat is defined, your ego is defined, your spleen is defined, and your root is defined.
Okay.
Based on this definition, you are a projector.
I see.
So if you had your sacral defined, that circle, the white circle in the middle,
right,
then you would be either a generator or a manifesting generator.
Okay. So it's like a bottom-up exercise, right? Like some inputs
Starts
come in.
with the gates.
Yeah. Some inputs come into this process of your creation. Which gates were open, which gates were closed, and then in addition, the date you were born, and which I guess is related to the planet alignment. Because what is the actual sort of the narrative that goes around why the significance of your date of birth? Is it because every day on Earth stars are aligned in a certain way, and so the energies or the gravitational forces that they exert have an impact on your blood or hormones or shit like that? Is this what's going on?
So if you want to get a bit more technical about it, basically there's the mix of neutrinos that I told you, there's a cocktail of neutrinos in any square meter.
Yeah.
The mix of neutrinos that you first were exposed to when you were born went through a crystal chakra, which is in your body, a crystal, a personality crystal in your body. And that's the yin and the yang. I think it's the yang.
Okay.
That determined which channels, which gates in your design are switched on and which ones are switched off.
Right.
So it's based on the neutrino cocktail that we would know which gates are switched on for any person, which ones are switched off.
Right. And this question is a bit. I should probably started with it, but now I'm very curious to ask it. Who came up with all of this? Like, because I know we still haven't covered all the ground, and I don't think we'll be able to. I think it's a series that we should do on it. But I'm going to try to cover as much ground on this topic in a high level manner. But who came up with it? Like,
okay, so that's the somewhat of a crazy story that I try not to say it to everyone, but because not everybody.
They call you a flat earther after, or
no, not really. But basically, so there's a guy called I think was Robert Krakower, or Robert Alan Krakower, something like that.
Yeah,
and he's a Canadian guy who was worked for like some ad company or something in Canada and was lost, felt like he was lost in life, and he wanted to go find himself. So he decided to leave Canada, took his dog with him, went to the airport, bought a ticket to Europe. He wanted to go find himself in Europe. So he went to the counter. They gave him a ticket to Spain. He landed in Barcelona, I think, or somewhere in Spain. He got out of the airport. He's basically with his backpack and his dog, and he got into a bus, and he told the bus driver, "I want to find myself. Where should I go?" And the bus driver referred him to the island of Ibiza. Like, that's the most spiritual place in our country. You should go there. So he got there. He rented a small cabin, and he moved in. He wanted a fresh start, basically, to go find himself. And one day he was out, and he didn't even have electricity in that house. He had a little lamp for light, and he ran out of oil. So he went out to buy some oil. And when he came back home, he could see a light source inside the house. And as he approached, he thought someone broke in at the beginning, but as he approached, he walked in, he opened the door, and he found this very, very strong, shiny light.
Okay.
And maybe he was tripping on something, who knows? But
it is Ibiza. Yeah, okay.
But this is in 1987 or 86.
Yeah, Ibiza was still like partying hard then. But yeah, go on.
But he wasn't there for the party
sure,
necessarily.
Sure. Yeah. He has to.
So he walked in, and he felt this sudden implosion.
Okay.
And he was suddenly standing in a puddle of his own sweat, and his dog was immediately floored and wasn't moving for the next 8 days. And he started hearing this sound, this voiceless voice that was telling him, voiceless as in he couldn't tell whether it's male or female, that was telling him to get to work and start writing. And he started writing, and what he calls it a download. He was downloading information maybe channeling, in other words, information for 8 days. And he came out of this trance basically after 8 days with this knowledge in his mind. And he started making charts, inviting people over from the town.
Yeah.
And drafting their charts based on their time and place of birth. And he started telling them about what was in his mind, what he knew about them, and people were just blown away by the information that they heard. So more and more people started coming. Everybody wanted to do their charts. And then at some point, they started getting him gifts and fruits and stuff like that, and almost turning him into a god, which is not what he wanted at all. So he just lost it, and he asked his friend to go and collect all the charts that he ever made, and he put them all in his guitar, which was his favorite possession, and he just set it all on fire. He burnt everything. And he left Ibiza and he went up to the mountains, and he wanted to be there in isolation for the next 2 years. Okay. Or he just wanted to be in isolation on his own with his dog. Over the course of these few years, the term neutrinos was released. So quantum
developed enough
physics. They released the term neutrinos, and he started seeing things that he started thinking that actually maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe what I downloaded was true, because this, kind of confirms what I've been thinking, or what I've downloaded basically. And when he started realizing that there's probably some truth behind it and that he's not crazy, he went back to Ibiza and he found the only woman that did not give back her chart. And from that chart, he was able to, in her time of birth and place of birth, he was able to reverse engineer how he was able to draw that chart.
Because he had burnt everything else in the guitar anyway, right?
Yeah, so, and he hasn't practiced it for several years, so he kind of, forgot. But from that chart, he was able to reverse engineer it, and he was able to recover about 90% of the knowledge that he acquired from that experience. And that started the what is human design today.
Is this guy still alive?
No, he passed away.
Do you know when he died, or?
I don't remember. Not that long ago. Honestly, I don't remember. In the 2000s.
And my second question is, how did you get into all of this, right? You seem to know enough about it to recite the story of the guy who started it all. Yeah. Never mind your ability to look at this and read it like it's a lab report, like a doctor. This is a level of intrigue and curiosity for you. Exactly. What got you into it, and what made you decide to dive so deep into it as well?
Okay, and that's so my sister, who's really into wellness and psychology and all that stuff, spirituality, came across human design a few years ago and told me about it and said this was something that you should look into. It's this new pseudoscience, and it's really worth exploring. And I just, I remember Googling it at the time, opening it in a tab on my phone in my browser, and I have many, many open tabs as something that I want to explore in the future.
Yeah.
And then I think a year had passed and I never got around to exploring it or even reading about it. And then I was sitting, my sister and my ex were sitting, and we started talking about human design. Colleen heard about it for the first time. And then suddenly, she's like, well, also because she's a manifesting generator, she's all about, just going for it.
She's part of the 70%.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm a generator.
Okay.
So, but as a manifesting the difference between a generator and manifesting generator is that once they get into something, they go. They don't stop. Generators, they think a little bit more before they go for something. So she went for it, and she's like, I want to look into this. So I went on Gaia. Are you familiar with Gaia?
Yeah. It's like a content.
It's like a YouTube for spirituality. Right. And
yeah.
And we looked up human design. We found an interview with this woman. This woman was having an interview with a guy called Chetan Parkins, who was basically trained by... so when Alan Krakower went through that experience, he changed his name to Ra Ururu. And I guess it was his, spiritual name or something.
Okay.
And Chetan Parkins was trained by Ra.
Okay.
And became a human design teacher.
Okay.
So he was giving a course. So as soon as Colleen heard about it, she's like, I'm signing up for this course immediately. So
Uh-huh.
she went, she checked it out. She did the report. The same. So that's the website that Bassel used.
Yeah.
So she did the report immediately. After you do the report and you pay that $20 or something, you get an email a few days later to get a free reading, like a 15-minute reading by Chetan Parkins, which she did. And as soon as she did it, like throughout the reading, she's like, "Oh, I'm signing up for your course." So she signed up for a 6-month course. She wanted to become a human design reader.
And is it because she found that a lot of the stuff that she got out of the reading happened to she related to it?
Totally. So
it was like I guess what the reason I'm asking is because, especially because you've said pseudoscience a couple of times now, and pseudoscience can include, unfortunately, can include a lot of things that are more science than pseudoscience, right? And when you go and you when you go and tell somebody something that they happen to believe could, like, this is a bad example, but if you go to a fortune teller, right? A fortune teller could tell you a lot of things about who you are and what's coming your way and shit like that, right? And a lot of people fall for fortune tellers because they say 3 out of 4 things that happen to be right, like somebody in your family who's with a certain letter in their name, like, and then they end up believing in that stuff. So at which point did you and Karen, your ex-wife, Kelleen, get into the technicalities of it to verify that it's a modality you want to trust in order to make your decisions, right? Because that's what's happening here. You're getting a reading about yourself, and it sounds pretty correct, and then you are trusting this analysis in order to make decisions about your life, I guess, right? This is the whole process of human design. So
look, I mean, I think we both went on this. I guess the timing was on point because we both had been going through a spiritual journey as well. And I mean, for me, I can speak for myself. For me, I've always been a very analytical, scientific person. It wasn't until recently that I realized science was kind of, a lot of things were getting debunked, things that we thought were valid and truth for so many years, that made me realize that, maybe science doesn't know everything. And it got me into that world of spirituality. And when I came across human design, I think, first of all, the interview that we watched on Gaia was just mind-blowing in the way he explained it. And we went and we both did our charts. So I did my chart, she did hers, we read them, it resonated completely. And the thing with human design is that older you are, with life, you eventually figure out your design. But when you say that to a person who's young, it can be a game changer.
Sure, of course.
So one of the most interesting use cases of human design is telling parents about their kids and how they should raise them,
sculpt their path accordingly.
So for example, as a projector, your projectors need to be recognized, because they have that bird's eye view. They can see. I told you know how to direct people onto the best way for them to utilize their energy. So you early on you figure things out early on, and you start wanting to tell your parents how to do things, but they don't take you seriously because you're a child, and that can be very frustrating for a projector. So a parent knowing that their kid is a projector can help them, give them that recognition that they need, and train them, because what projectors need to do for them to live in peace is to learn how to wait for the invitation to help, because you are wired, you're programmed to want to help people and direct them in a way and lead them. So you need to be taught to learn how to wait for the invitation. You demonstrate your skill set to people around you, and then you wait for them to ask you for help.
Wow.
And that if you don't learn that, and in relationships, that can be problematic, because you do tend to give unsolicited help. I don't know if you can relate to that personally.
I mean, I certainly found myself in a lot of points in my life where I made decisions that felt like just not aligned with how I should be, and I've made them. I mean, this is when you start to see the contrast between a certain reality that you have chosen for yourself or life has put you in, and what might feel like a more flowing format or situation for you in your life. It could be relationships, work, country, even hobbies, even some people that you click with, and how you see yourself through their own eyes, maybe through conversation. there must be something that I feel good in certain situations and I feel bad in others, right? And so far so good. Like that logic I buy. And then if there is a theory that happens to then explain to you why hanging out with Fares is more easygoing than hanging out with X, and there seems to be a narrative that can substantiate it, then this is like almost like a shame that people don't know it, because they can make better decisions for their own lives. They can better raise their kids better. They can choose their partners better, their jobs. And I mean, like, is this like the kind of thing that is like ahead of its time? And like, in like 30 years, everybody's going to be like...
I think so. I think so, 100%. I mean,
Is the reason
anyone
why
who I have ever told about, especially people who have made a recent, like a major change in their life and are a lot happier than they used to be and found success or peace or whatever they're seeking. When I tell them about human design, they're just blown away, because it basically confirms all the right steps that they've recently taken. Like I was in Saudi, for example, a few weeks ago, and I met this guy who, recently, I think during COVID, a lot of people sort of shied away a little bit from corporate life and started looking for at least their calling, what really resonates with them, or looking for their purpose. In other words, I don't like to use that term much, but their purpose. And people who managed to find that purpose became a lot more fulfilled in life. And when you say that to somebody when I explain human design to somebody who has found their purpose to a certain extent,
via human design?
Well, no, not via human design. But when I tell them about human design, like the reaction I often get is like, "Oh my God, like that's exactly what I've been doing lately," and it's been a game changer in my life.
Wow!
So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
Like, so then there is, of course, the natural risk that comes with everything, not just with human design, where like you might even go to a therapist and that person is going to psychoanalyze you based on your order compared to your siblings, or your child trauma, or the fact that you are a predisposed addict because of certain brain dysfunction. Like all of those kind of the more scientific answer to the Freudian ones, to the medical versions, they all have the error of misdiagnosing somebody or misanalyzing somebody. And then, but because of the explanation that could sound, charismatic, or it could sound legitimate, or it can even corroborate a certain few things. Is there the risk, and this is a broad question, not just about human design, but like the risk that we run as humans to believe a certain narrative about ourselves based on different analysis, and then maybe it leads us astray almost, because it's like, what's the chicken, what's the egg? Is it the narrative that reinforces a certain personality, or have you ever given that some thought? Because
definitely, I mean, look, I think,
and I'm approaching this with a bit of a skepticism, because I think it's a topic that it should have. I mean, I'm now very curious about the topic even more than I was, because, but I think with everything in life, even if you give me a report about my blood tests, I will probably look at it with questions, right? So this
which is important. Yeah, I mean, I think we have to.
So how do you grapple with the kind of obvious questions that could come with the
See, with this, it's really, for me, it's more about trying it out
with an open mind,
and with an open mind, and then seeing how it works for you. For example, being a 3-5 generator. Okay, so I'll tell you a bit about myself, because I know my design really well. I'm a generator, which means that I can produce an unlimited amount of energy, because I have a defined sacral center, if I'm doing what I love to do, as long as I'm doing what lights me up. And I've always noticed it in my life, right? So if I like to party, if I'm in a phase where I like to party, I usually outlast anyone else in a party, because I'm doing what drives me, what excites me. When I'm interested in something, for example, most recently, when I got into, so around, I mean, this is a bit off topic, but it does tie into human design. When around Halloween, I went to a party, I got sick. After the party, a flu. I thought it was COVID, but I didn't test positive. But it forced me to, because we're, in these times, my office was like stay at home for 10 days. And I decided to take that opportunity at the beginning of November to explore crypto more properly. Right? I've been investing in crypto for a while, but it was always small amounts. And I never really took the time to fully understand it. although I should be able to, because I come from an undergrad background of computer science and business and finance. So, I should be in a position to understand it better than most, at least, or better than the average. And when I started, and even though I was sick and I had a really bad flu for 10 days, I found myself waking up, sleeping for like 2 hours a day. I was so excited with this knowledge and this new information that I was learning. I was sleeping for 2 to 3 hours a day and waking up fully energized and ready to like start my day and learn more. And that's because I was doing what excites me, what lights me up. And it also made me realize that at work, at least in the last year or so, I've been after 8 hours. Sleep for me is sacred. And even after 8 hours of sleep, I'd wake up and I still feel a bit tired. And that's because it wasn't lighting me up anymore. At least doing what I was doing, especially I work in banking. Sure. And banking recently has become all about
crypto
compliance.
Oh, sure.
Compliance and admin work, and not the part of my job that excites me, not the investment analysis.
Not the stuff that used to fire you up in the past, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was a huge sign for me that, like, this crypto stuff really speaks to me. It excites me. And it just, I never thought that I could operate on like 2 hours of sleep every day for multiple days while I'm sick.
And feel energized somehow.
Feel super energized. Like as soon as I'd wake up, I check and I'm just wired and ready to learn more.
Well, then let's take that example. So you are a manifestor, right?
I'm a generator.
You're a generator. So because you're a generator, you're attributing that to your kind of a topic that has sparked your interest, and you went all in, and then as opposed to what other kind of category in human design that would have been otherwise more surface level or not fired up by anything.
Okay. So let's take you, for example, and not that you're not fired up by anything.
You can use me as an example.
Yeah. You're a projector. Projectors cannot create an unlimited amount of energy. You have a set limited amount of energy every day that you wake up with.
So true.
And the best thing for a projector is to work, and this goes contrary. So projectors are the types, the energy types that when you tell a projector about human design, they're always blown away, because the world is designed for the majority, which are generators and manifest generators. We're the builders of the world. Projectors are the leaders, the ones that direct people on how to best use their energy. So as a projector, it is best for you to work for 3 hours a day.
Bro, that's so fucking true, because that's actually how I live my life today.
Yeah.
Like,
and projectors in COVID and work from home, they really cherished that period because nobody was watching them. They were able to actually work for 3 hours a day. So if you work in a corporate environment where you have to be in the office for 8 hours a day, the best way for you is to work for 1 hour, go take a break, walk around, just
I hate to be the cliche guy that says, so true, but that is actually so true. Even in my consulting years, which were the most demanding in office hours, like I thrived in doing high maximum productivity, least amount of hours, productive, I get shit done at the right amount of quality and everything. But it's that, as opposed to some people that I would look at and be like, what the fuck are you still doing? 10 hours in the office behind your desk.
But I mean, that's the thing about your design, that in 3 hours a day, you can do what a generator can do in 8 hours a day if you work efficiently. But if you exceed 3 hours a day of concentrated work, you're going to burn out, and that's going to backfire on you. And you're just going to be tired and exhausted. That's a very
interesting. So this is where, like, you and I, as
specific.
different types, we could have different capacities almost for certain things where, like, I'm actually almost limited by a certain amount of attention or resources that I'm willing to invest in anything, even though I could be passionate about it. And by the way, that's so true. Like, I could start something, be hyper excited about it, almost like bipolar. And then, like, just at a certain amount of time, I lose interest. Like, I could just swing away and totally go into boredom mode, from super excitement to super boredom, and like that.
Look, another important thing I think about projectors is that every projector has a thing, okay? And it's important that you find your thing. And that thing, the way you're going to recognize what that thing is, it's what you can, contrary to your lack of energy, it's what you can spend nights researching because you're just so obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Okay, the key for you is to find your thing, become an expert at it, demonstrate to the world that you are good at that thing without being pushy, without giving unsolicited help, and then waiting for the invitation for people to ask you for help.
Wow. And it's exactly how my life is being lived right now. My God, man, this is kind of freaking me out, by the way, because I'm having almost like an existential crisis, or a love-hate relationship, let's say, is more accurate, with my with the career that I feel chose me. I always have it. So I'm going to take a bit of a tangent here, just to illustrate kind of where I am in my life. And I think to the extent that it reconciles with what you're saying, since we're using me as an example, because I have a company that I don't spend as much hours as I should on it. And I sometimes feel like this whole career, which is a kind of like executive search, recruitment, I never kind of thought I'd be in it, but like I happen to have this company. Thank God it does very well. And I do very well at it apparently. And I can only do so many hours of it a day, but it's exactly, it almost feels like my relationship with how I stumbled into this career that I'm in right now, which I happen to be very good at, seems to come from a sort of predisposition or a predetermination almost. And I always wonder, like, how do I even find myself in this, right? Like, and I happen to do well at it, but I'm always, there's always this disconnect between how I found myself in an optimal state that actually checks all my boxes for my freedom, for my personal life, for my career, for my income, for my success. But I never was able to really kind of, connect an obvious passion-based way to get there. I just, I found it, it's good for me, it works for me, so I keep it and I do it, basically.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about projectors is that it's not the status quo. It's not what society tells you how you should be. You know what I mean? It tells you about working long hours, putting in the time and all that stuff, whereas as a projector, you don't need to do that. You do have that ability to, because you have that bird's eye view and you're very good at directing and leading people. So if, let's say, if we're part of a rowing team, for example, a projector would be sitting at the helm, at the top, at the front of the boat, directing the rowers, which ideally should be generators and manifesting generators, because if they love to row, they can produce an unlimited amount of energy doing that. Now, within projectors, there's also different types of projectors. There's energy projectors, there's classic projectors, and there's mental projectors. I can't tell what you are, but I think you are an energy projector because you have a defined heart center, which means you have a little bit more energy than a typical classic projector or a mental projector. And there's something in human design called a projector nap. Projectors need to nap.
Oh, okay.
You would not need it as much because if you are in fact an energy projector, which I think you are.
Right.
Okay. Now, the idea, and for you to enter that flow, is that you basically have to find your thing, figure out what your thing is. You probably, by this age, you probably found it. You probably know it. Even if you're not very conscious of it, you probably know what it is.
Sure.
Focus on that. Become an expert in that. Demonstrate to the world that you're good at that.
Yeah.
And then wait for the invitation to help people.
Yeah.
And that's your contribution to the world.
Right. And that's exactly kind of where I am right now. As I was telling the previous story, it happens to be that this is the place I found myself in, basically. And so you are living your life as well, so you got into this space with your ex-wife, and it fascinated you. And now you make decisions, or you live your life driven by that compass.
100%.
And it's been net positive. Has it ever been net negative? Yeah.
100% positive. So the biggest thing for me, and I guess this applies, being a generator, and that's probably will apply to 70% of the viewers, is that so as a projector, every energy type has a strategy, right? So your strategy is to wait for the invitation. As a projector, my strategy is to respond. Okay, I'm supposed to sit back, and life is going to throw things my way, whether it's job opportunities or trips or plans or whatever. And I'm not meant to initiate. I'm meant to sit back and respond. And when I get something offered to me, whether it's a job opportunity or a trip or whatever, I should check in with my authority, which for me is my gut. And my gut is going to clearly tell me either a yes or a no. There's no gray in the gut.
Nice. Interesting.
And I should follow my gut 100%. And when I don't follow my gut, that leads to frustration. So for example, to give you an example of a gut following the gut, and it's a bit different than an instinct, which you have, and I'll explain that in a second. But let's say I love pizza, which I do, and you ask me, do you feel like having pizza tonight? And my instant reaction is like, no, I'm not feeling it, or like a meh, you know? But then instead of following my gut, I use my mind. And I think, actually, you know what, Yazan, let's order pizza because we're going to go to the movies in an hour, and if it comes late, we can take it with us. So now I use my mind. I ignored my authority, and I used my mind to make the decision. I am I am guaranteed to not enjoy that pizza, even though I normally love pizza. And this is an actual experience that I've had before. So this is an illustration of how to use your gut, how to listen to your authority. In your case, it's your spleen, it's your instinct. So let's say somebody comes and says, I want to go on your show. And you have this instant reaction where you just feel like it's not the vibe that you want on your show.
Sure.
You should trust it.
Right.
Because if you don't,
Yeah. I'm working against what my
authority is.
Right. Wow. So like ultimately, like if all, so to the extent that all of this actually is, I mean, we agree it's pseudoscience, so there is a potential inaccuracy in it, but like I'm not, this is, my point is not to try to, actually it'll be an easy position for me to try to dissect why it would be, but just for the sake of the discussion, the reason why people should get into human design and they should include it as part of their lifestyle and their introspection and learning about themselves, is it because it actually helps them avoid making decisions that could be misaligned with the path that would be more ideal for them? Is this like the right, like kind of
So in human design, there's something called a self-theme and a not self-theme. Your not self-theme is going to be an outcome of making just bad decisions that counter your design.
Sure.
And a self-theme is being in flow, entering flow, and that's what that's what we're all trying to achieve. And it's people ask what's the purpose of life, and I always thought the purpose is for me to be happy. And this is, I guess, where it's not happiness as much as it's probably fulfillment, to feel fulfilled.
Right.
And I think you enter fulfillment by following your design and your authority.
I see.
If that makes any sense.
Because people do talk about, and this is not necessarily related to human design, about how you shouldn't be seeking happiness, like in the hedonistic sense, and you should be seeking fulfillment and meaningfulness, right? And that happens a lot in things like doing things for other people, being altruistic, or being creative, or doing what you're good at and what is challenging enough, like according to the flow model, which has like a 2x2 matrix that says like your challenge needs to be high in a skill that you have that is also high. Mm-hmm. This is what's so interesting, is that when you start to actually look at all those different frameworks, they sort of reconcile, and like the sweet spot is actually right where they do overlap. Like kind of like a personality analysis frameworks that are not, they don't have anything to do with human design, and then human design that has to do a little bit with quantum and planets, and then there is like a more outside-in view of your past and your childhood, and then you look at all those things, and actually it's an opportunity and a challenge at the same time, because if you're trying to like optimize your life, like you're trying to follow the best recommendation that exists out there, and clearly none of them are perfect. So the challenge here is that as a human being, you get all these different frameworks thrown at you, and you have to like look at them and be like, okay, I'm a little bit of this, I'm a little bit of that. That seems to work, and then that can be confusing for some people. And then I think the best thing you can do is how do you find the overlapping sweet spot between all of them that you can also be convinced in, and you can also relate to, and then that potentially is there's a Japanese framework for it actually. It's a separate framework, and it's called the Ikigai, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a book about it. I haven't read it, but I'm like 20% into it, and then I kind of got distracted.
So if there's one thing that I personally,
but that's about fulfillment, right?
Absolutely, but it's an overlap of different things. Like it kind of does this Venn diagram. We can pull it up at one point, but it's basically a Venn diagram that looks at different things and says, okay, if you're those things, and then there's a bunch of other things over here socially, and here professionally, and here personally, and then like your Ikigai is in the middle. I might be butchering the framework, but basically the point is, what I like about this framework, and what I think we could learn from that framework, is that if you want to be, this is the advice that I would give myself. If I want to try to follow a framework for self-help or for optimizing my life, probably the most, I'm going to be I'm better off trying to look at all those different modalities with an open mind, not trying to debunk one or the other, and then see where they all seem to have a consistent common denominator. Like I could read a book by Freud, maybe Carl Jung, go to Bali, do some yoga, then I might do some ayahuasca. I could also go to some psychiatrist in California, and I can do all of those things, and it might seem like a lot of clutter, and it's hard to reconcile all of those things. But probably the best thing you could do for yourself is, what is the common denominator between all of those things? Are you impulsive as a human being? Are you overly excitable and potentially, or are you more risk averse, or are you more, and I think like some sort of high level conclusion can be probably easier to digest and is more palpable for the average human being, unless you're like a very enlightened person with enough capacity to really look at all the nuances of human design. I mean, this is a very detailed framework, right? It's not a simple framework. Like if you want to get into it properly and apply it to yourself, this requires a year or two probably of learning it. It's not an easy framework.
Yeah. Look, learning about yourself can be done in a matter of months because you can read all the information that's specific to you. Yeah. So for example, one of my channels, which is between my root and my spleen, is called the judgment channel. Okay, and this judgment channel means that because it's linked to your spleen, so it's an instinctual thing. It means I have this ability to, when I look at a system, I immediately instinctually judge it in a way, in the sense that, and it sounds, there's a lot of naming in human design that does not really represent what it's meant to mean, but basically, when I look at a system, whether it's the post system or the schooling system or any kind of the system at work, I instinctually see what is wrong with it and how it can be improved for everyone else. Okay, that's called the judgment channel. And that really, I mean, at work, I always participate in pilots and stuff like that because I have this ability to see where things can be improved. Now that channel, and knowing that about yourself, because that channel is a double-edged sword. If I bring it home to my relationships, you can come off as somebody, although your intention when you criticize something, a system, is to improve it for the benefit of everybody, it may come off as unsupportive. So if my partner tells me that they want, I don't know if you can relate to that. I can check if you have that channel in you.
And I'm thinking while you do that, like it's the confirmation bias of it all, right? I mean, to what extent does it become the basis of you approaching things in life, being like, yo, I'm a projector, so therefore
you don't have it.
Okay, but yeah,
but you have the channel of structuring. So I don't know a lot of your channels. I don't know them by heart, but you have the channel of structuring.
Listen, one thing we can agree to, I hope, is that life is too complex to really, and I don't think there's any modality out there that will be 100% or even close to 80-70% accurate in fully analyzing you as a person. Like, there's your childhood, there's your nature, there's nurture, there's your ancestors. Forget about human design for a second. There's all the shit that you went through in your life, and maybe also the health lifestyle that you have. Are you on drugs? Are you drinking? Are you working out? Are you meditating? And then you are the human being of it all. Like, you're the output of it all. But despite this complexity, knowing that you have certain predispositions and trying to live by them and not to resist them, but to actually embrace them, however way I tell you what your predispositions are, is efficient. You get to live a life that is good for you. You make choices that you're not going to regret too late into your life, or that are going to be too harmful.
It's awareness.
100%. And I mean, so especially something that happens to combine. I mean, human design, what fascinates me about it a lot is the fact that it seems to combine, and obviously we're not going to be able to get into it in nitty-gritty detail, but there is some level of kind of scientific, quantum, molecular aspect to it. But there's also something a bit more abstract. There's also the energies in your body, your chakras. So I like it for no other reason other than the fact that it seems to combine a lot of things, science and things that are not entirely scientific, to give you some sort of analysis. What I fear is that it might get
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. Before I got into human design, I was very curious about a lot of things. As I said initially, I was always a very analytical person. And I needed to understand things. I needed science to at least tell me that this has been proven.
Yeah.
And the only, I guess, thing that was, the only part of me that was somewhat accepting to things that I cannot see was the law of attraction. So my mom made me read The Secret when I graduated from university.
Me too.
Or high school, I don't even remember. And I remember thinking, what kind of, that doesn't even make sense. But I remember there an example being in The Secret. They in the book, they said that you have to pick something very trivial, something meaningless, and try it out. And at the time, back in the days when we first moved here, right? So this is in 2007 or something, before Dubai Mall even opened.
Sure.
We used to go to Mall of the Emirates all the time, if you remember.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest challenges that we had on a weekly basis, many challenges, was finding parking space in Mall of the Emirates, right?
Yeah. You have to park at the handicap parking and pay 500 dirhams sometimes just to, yeah.
I tried to avoid breaking that law, but
Expensive.
But I spent a lot of time cruising around the parking lot waiting for a parking spot closest to the cinema gates, basically, where we used to go.
Right.
So, I remember one day reading the book, and they said, try this exercise and visualize a spot in the mall, basically, and visualize it long enough, but visualize it and really know that it's going to be there when you get there. And I would do it every day. I did it the first day. I get in the car, I visualize my specific spot where I want it to be exactly. I start driving. It was 12, 15-minute drive from Oasis Tower to the mall at the time. And the first time I got there, I look and I'm like, wow, like that, the spot was there. I was like, okay, that's a weird coincidence, whatever, it's fine. The next time I try it again and the spot is there. And then I realize every time I try it, the spot is there. When I forget to try it and I remember a bit too late, sometimes the spot is not exactly there, but at least I can find something on that same, line. Or even when I get there and I forget to try it, then I do it in the moment and I really fixate on it. I just park on the side for like 30 seconds and then somebody comes out and I find my spots. I'm like, okay, this is weird. I can't explain it, but there's something there. There's something with the law of attraction. And at the time, the way my theory evolved was that I had to do some research behind it. And I read about this Harvard research study about they interviewing a class, I'm probably butchering it now, but basically interviewing a class of MBA graduates. And they realized that the ones that had goals, specific goals, were the ones to most likely achieve those goals. And then the second, and those were maybe 5% of the class. And then 20 or 30% of the class kind of knew what they wanted, but it wasn't very specific. And the rest really had no goals. And there was a study about how like knowing your goals, knowing what you want increases your chances of getting them. And I thought, okay, this makes sense. When you visualize things, as silly as this exercise may sound, maybe you're now, like if you do it enough times, you're kind of pushing it out of from your conscious into your unconscious, that you're really working towards that goal with every bit of you. Yeah. Right. And that increases your chances of succeeding. So, I could work with that rationale. So I'm like, all right, I can do a bit of visualization. I can't get too deep into it, but I can do a little bit of that. And then, so that was my intro, I guess, to the law of attraction.
Right.
And then after, a few years later, when I started reading more about it, I thought that the way I was able to validate the stuff to myself is by backtesting it on things in my life. Mm-hmm. And I realized that in matters where I have doubts or I have suspicions, in matters where I just believed something categorically that this is how it's going to be, things worked out. And whenever doubt started to sink in and mess around, things didn't work out.
Yeah.
Like, okay, there's a bit of truth in that as well. And so now I started believing more and more in the law of attraction. Sure. And then I stumbled upon Abraham Hicks, and I read the book The Vortex, and I was like, wow, this really blows my mind, because actually before The Vortex I read a book called Conversations with God. Are you familiar with that book?
I think Bassett gave me that book, actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken. What's the author's name?
Donald Walsh.
Okay, I might be mixing books here. Okay, yeah.
Donald Walsh.
I haven't heard that book.
So Conversation with God became my go-to, like my guide to everything in life. There's book 1, 2, and 3, and it's about this author that was, I think he was 55 years old when he wrote that book. And this book was written in the 90s. It was a top seller in the 90s, a New York Times bestseller in the 90s. And it was about this guy who's from some state in the US, like something suburban, and everything in life was going really badly for him. Like his career was living paycheck to paycheck. His wife, hated him. His relationship with his kids was practically non-existent. Everything in life, health-wise, he was not doing well. Everything in life for him was going really badly. So I think a therapist or someone told him that you should write letters to people that you feel have oppressed you in life every day. But you don't have to send it to them, but just a way for him to vent. So he started writing these letters and he started feeling a bit better about himself. Until one night he wakes up in the middle of the night and he feels this discomfort, this anger, and he goes and he gets his writing pad and he starts writing a letter directed to God. Why is this happening to me? What have I done to deserve this? How can I change my life? Just venting and complaining. And towards the end of that letter, he started getting this weird sense where he kind of felt like he was hearing some form of dictation, and he started writing answers. And the first line that came out is, do you really want answers to these questions, or are you just venting? So he responds and he says, sure, I might be just venting, but if there are answers to these questions, I would sure as hell would like to know them. And from then started a dialogue, basically, that went on presumably between him and God.
Into 3 books.
Wow. Over a period of 10 years. And these books are, for me, they're my Bible.
Yeah.
They're my Bible. And what basically he says is that God communicates with all of us. He doesn't claim to be a prophet or a messenger or anything like that, but he says God did I say complains?
I guess what you were trying to say, converses with you? Yeah.
Communicates.
Yeah.
I guess it's the wine. God communicates with all of us.
Right.
But he doesn't communicate with us through words. He communicates with us through our feelings and our emotions and our experiences.
Sure.
Because words are actually the most open to misinterpretation, and feelings are the clearest and easiest way for this kind of divine communication. Because words are actually simply utterances that are meant to describe feelings and emotions.
Right, yeah. They're inefficient.
Yeah, exactly. So the most efficient way that God would communicate with you is through your feelings. Now, it's important to distinguish between 2 types of feelings. There are only 2 root emotions in life. There's an emotion that there's love and there's fear. These are the only 2 root emotions. And there are feelings that are rooted in love and there are feelings that are rooted in fear. And anything that's rooted in love is a divine communication. Or a divine message. And anything that's rooted in fear comes from your subconscious, from your insecurities and stuff like that. And his idea is that if you follow these divine messages that are rooted in love, you should enter flow, I guess, in other words. But Conversations with God goes into so much more detail and covers everything, from the understanding of space-time to aliens, to outer worlds, to past lives, to energy, to healers. Everything. Covers literally everything. And when I read this book, I was blown away by it.
But then how did you apply that book to your life in a way that helped you make better decisions?
So that helped me understand a lot of things and just become a little bit more open to the idea of the law of attraction.
Right.
So Conversations with God took me a little too deep into the details of everything, manifestation, how it works and all that stuff. And then after Conversations with God, I read The Vortex, which is the book by Abraham Hicks. Are you familiar with Abraham Hicks?
Not so much, no.
So Esther Hicks is the woman that's technically behind The Secret, but the book was taken and completely commercialized and mass-produced, and they sort of don't even mention her in the book.
Did she do is she a sexologist as well? Oh, okay, sorry. I might be confusing people here.
No. She's somebody who... her main thing is the law of attraction, that everything in life we attract.
Yeah. I remember the whole Oprah thing that happened, and people misinterpreted it because Oprah had this. She brought this book to The Secret specifically.
Oh, really?
So The Secret, I remember, was hyped up at a time when Oprah was still doing the show, and then it created a huge buzz. And yeah, people misinterpreted it like in a way that probably is still misinterpreted until today, which is that you can just imagine something and it'll happen, but like it can't be that simple, right? But yeah, I mean, the law of attraction and The Secret is based on that fact, and then they created a video of it, I think, which really depicted it in a hyperbolized way.
The documentary.
Yeah, which is like, yeah, if you're gonna be cranky in the morning, you're just gonna, you're gonna create a car accident for yourself. Like, I mean, it can't be like so linear, right? But that
It kind of is.
Directionally, I get the idea, right? Like, you manifest what you are imagining.
I mean, we've all been through an experience where you were in the flow, and everything was working out for you. And we've all been through an experience where something bad happens and then just everything does not work out after that.
Yeah.
So when I read about that and I started applying it, just back testing it on my life, it started checking out. And when I started consciously trying to apply it, it just also worked out in a really nice way.
Yeah.
But I didn't stop at that. It wasn't enough for me to like hear about, Donald Neil Walsh talk about conversations with God, or Esther Hicks talk about, Abraham, her spirit guide, or her guide, which she channels, that tells her about the law of attraction. I had to dig even deeper. And then I started reading about Joe Dispenza.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because Joe Dispenza takes a completely scientific angle to the whole thing, right? And Joe Dispenza...
The frontal lobe and the neuroplasticity and all of that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the foundation, as I see it, of Joe Dispenza was that for a hypothesis to graduate and become a theory, you need to be able to repeat it multiple times and yield the same results, right? And that's when a hypothesis can become proven to become a theory.
According to the scientific process.
Exactly, according to the scientific process.
Yeah.
Now, in these... I guess, how would I call them? In these experiments that they would do, there was always a sample of people that did not fit into the study that they just always dismissed as the placebo effect. And there was always a certain percentage of people that just didn't fall into the study that it was a placebo effect. And they ignored that and they worked with whatever did not fall into the placebo effect. What Joe Dispenza wanted to do is he said that if the placebo effect is so consistent, why don't we try to study the placebo effect?
Sure.
What the hell is going on there? Because that's like the one consistent factor.
Yeah.
And
even in medicine, by the way.
Yeah. Or even the nocebo, right? So there is this effect that just doesn't fit into the sample.
Right.
And what he realized, and the reason it's hard to study the placebo effect is because the mind is probably the biggest thing that affects it the most, right? And it's much more difficult to measure the mind. But today we're able to measure the mind a lot better, right? And the pineal gland and all that stuff. So he was tackling the same sort of philosophy from a scientific angle. And what I realized the more I read different approaches is that they're all trying to say the same thing. They're literally all saying the same thing.
Like positive affirmations, or think well for yourself, or be kind to yourself. And also have, it's all these positive...
Your mind is creative.
Right.
That's it. Your mind creates everything. The positive scenarios, the negative scenarios, all of it. Your mind is, the power of your mind is unbelievable.
Right.
In terms of creation. And when you think about it, and then conversations goes a bit deeper. And when you think about it, you realize, I don't think there's even a better way to design the universe and the universal laws to operate other than that, right? Because conversations made me believe that we're here to, so assuming conversation believes that there's no hell. Basically, hell is an experience that you have on earth. There's only something called heaven, or the absolute world. Yeah. The absolute world.
And hell is what we're living today.
And hell is part of the human experience. So in an absolute world, or what we think is heaven, everything is positive. There's no darkness. There's only light. Everything is good. There's no time. It's eternal. After spending a lot of time in that space, you kind of, because you know everything conceptually, you kind of lose the ability to experience things, because the only way you can experience is through contrast.
Sure, yeah.
And this is when your soul decides to send a part of it to experience an entire human experience, or to experience a life.
In contrast to what's going to happen after.
Well, let's say your permanent residence is the absolute world where you reside after,
Right, yeah.
where everything is light and everything is good,
Yeah.
and it's eternal. So
Yeah.
time doesn't, never really doesn't end. Imagine being in that state. If you live in that state, if that's your permanent residence, then that can become boring after a while, and you're going to want something more experiential. You're going to want an experience where you can actually, in order for you to experience something, you need to, for example, you can't know that you're tall unless you've seen someone who's short.
Sure, yeah.
You don't understand light until you've seen darkness.
Right.
You don't understand happiness until you've seen sadness.
So you have to experience the human condition as it exists in order for you to
experience contrast.
Yeah, exactly.
Contrast.
And the human condition that we live in here is the contrast.
The physical world is all about contrast. It's only about
to
contrast.
what's coming next, basically.
It's the yin and the yang. It's the contrast that enables us to experience life.
Yeah.
Experientially, to go through life experientially, basically.
Wow.
If that makes
yeah, absolutely, man,
sense.
absolutely. And listen, one thing I say is, like, in general, because you mentioned placebo and nocebo, and I think just for the sake of, I mean, most people know what placebo is. It's like, for example, when you take a medicine, it's just a sugar pill, but you treat a disease that you have in yourself. And so
the treatment works by taking a sugar pill because you think it's real medication.
Exactly, and that's called placebo. Nocebo is like when I tell you, like, this pill is going to harm you, but it's actually just a sugar pill, or an empty pill, and it will harm you anyway, just because.
Exactly.
So the mind is so powerful in that these things are exactly what is used in labs when they produce medicine in order to validate whether the medicine actually works or whether it's somebody thinking it works, because people are capable of making it work on their own.
Yeah.
And that's how they validate to what extent the medicine actually works objectively. But the best, like, it almost feels like we are getting at a point in our lives as human beings where if you're going to try to look for the right answers purely based on logic, science, and a kind of empirical evidence, it might sound more convincing because it's more science-based and more demonstrable and so on. But trying to live your life based on intention first, and let the intention and the vision that you want to have manifest drive your process towards it, seems to just be the better way. It may be based on some bullshit, but that's okay. Like, if it's good
as
for
long
you,
as it works.
Yeah, like, it doesn't have to be objectively correct according to the scientific method for it to be good for you and for you to follow it as a human being.
You would be leaving so much on the table.
Yeah.
The
only problem is that it gets exploited like everything else in life. Some people might try to sell you like some sort of like service for $1,000 an hour, and these guys exist based on all these things. And so some people who are in deep need of help, and I was talking about the exact same thing on my last episode actually, that's a problem with anything that is not like really like, can you prove it type of logic, is that a lot of people hijack it, commercialize it, commoditize it, sell it, exploit people who are desperate for help. And they contaminate it for everybody else who actually has the right intention, or who could have helped a bunch of people, all of humanity, hopefully one day, had it not been for a few sketchy, scam artists who just want to make a quick buck off of it.
I agree with that 100%, and you see that happen all the time. That's why I think it's important for us to learn the stuff on our own. It's important for you to explore that and not rely on a crutch or a person to treat you. And this is at least the method that I prefer to take. I like to understand these things. I like to read books about them and just do it yourself, basically.
And I want to make sure that we cover everything I wanted to cover with you while you're here without getting into a 6-hour episode, because I can totally see that we can do that.
Yeah.
And I know we haven't covered enough ground on human design that would be fully, but what I'm hoping to achieve in this episode is to create enough curiosity for myself, box checked, and for others who are listening and watching to get into it and to see if it works for them or not. And then do you have like, we're going to go to a few things in a second, but do you have any like books or recommendations of where somebody who might be interested to learn more about human design, what's the best place to start?
Yeah. So I think the best, so there are many human design calculators out on the internet. You just type human design and you put in your details, you get your chart. You don't even need to pay for the report. You can get your chart. I find the best way is to, once you get your chart, there are three primary elements to your chart: your energy type,
Yeah.
which is a projector for you;
The compass.
your authority, which is splenic; and your profile, which is 5-1, which we did not talk about at all. But I will touch upon that
Okay.
in a second if we have
Yeah,
time.
yeah. By the way, we can keep talking about it too. I mean, I'm not in a rush or anything. So
Okay.
yeah.
So so once any of the listeners does their chart, go on YouTube and type human design projector or generator and watch a video about projectors, because that tells you how your energy type operates. Then type human design splenic authority, for example, and watch a video about your authority and how it works, and then do the same with your profile.
Okay.
And watch a video. That's the best way to do it, because it's a lot easier than it segregates all three parts, and it's better for you to understand each one and what role it plays in your life.
But where can somebody read a book to understand the original interpretation on how these things were designed to begin with? If somebody's a bit more curious, they don't want to just take this information at heart, and they want to understand a little bit more, like, where does this come from?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've been reading a lot less books and watching videos. Wow, Bitcoin's up quite a bit today.
Also, I'm just ordering food for us for after the podcast.
I've been watching videos more than reading books lately. I just find it more efficient. But the book that I would recommend for someone who wants to go in depth on the subject is by Chetan Parkins,
Okay.
the guy who Colleen did the course with, and the book is called Human Design Book by Chetan Parkins.
طيب. You meant the degenerate that I am, that you said Bitcoin is up today. I have a short position on Ethereum. So I want to make sure I'm not like fully liquidated at this point. All right, so far so good. We're good. We're fine. We're fine. We're okay. Life's good.
Where did you open your short?
31.80. Yeah, I'm all right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm good. And also not fully in, so we're good.
Yeah.
I had a lot of crypto lessons. I think again, this warrants a series on its own. Trading, margin trading, got in it from 2017. I hodled, I traded, I made money that if I mention right now, I'll probably give myself a heart attack. I lost money. Same thing will give me a heart attack. Like, I went through the whole cycle. So I can
The
actually
2017 cycle of altcoins or mostly Bitcoin and Ethereum?
No, so I got into it early 2018, right after the crash. So just after Bitcoin dipped from 20K to 10K, then 10 to 14, and then it just this whole thing from 14 to 10 and then to 3. And so this is when I started buying. And if I had everything I bought at the time, my God, I would be retired 6 times over by now. But then naturally, as with every person who gets in crypto, with my predispositions for gambling and high adrenaline rush and instant gratification, I traded a lot. I lost a lot of money, but it was all money that I had also made. So it was it felt like easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
And so, that's a good segue to get into crypto, because there's 2 more things I want to talk to you about. So let's talk about crypto. And before I hijack this segment and talk about my degenerate past in crypto and my more matured version, because like I've actually been getting richer on crypto after I had to do the mistakes and learn from myself. So like I'm proud of myself.
That's good.
For the last year and a half or so. So the maturity line goes up, and that's a good news. I want to ask you about your experience with crypto and on NFTs especially, because I mean, you seem to have had last time I spoke to you, it sounded like this is like the thing that keeps you the most curious at this point.
Yeah.
What are you doing with NFTs or crypto in general?
Yeah. Well, I mean, crypto is, one thing. I believe in crypto. You just buy and hold. I'm not a trader. I learned that from my career as a banker. Although, the more I watch, the more I read lately, I feel like with crypto, there is a lot. It's so volatile that there's a lot of room for trading. But I'm just generally, conditioned myself not to become a trader and to just be a buy and hold kind of person. And I think most people that trade, I mean, you just said that right now, and most people that trade will tell you I would have been better off just holding on to my positions. NFTs, on the other hand, is this, bubble that I started hearing about not long ago. I mean, NFTs aren't really not that old. The first NFT was CryptoPunks in 2017, but generally the boom really started in probably around mid 2020.
Sure, yeah.
Later.
Or even later than that, yeah.
Maybe beginning of 2021. And I saw that bubble forming, and I was like, I missed out on the first bubble of crypto, and mostly not because I wasn't a believer. I was always a believer because I have a computer background and I read Satoshi's white paper back in 2014, I think, and I was like, this is amazing. But it wasn't as accessible at the time. You couldn't open a Binance account. Binance didn't exist. I remember setting up a MetaMask wallet. It wasn't even MetaMask at the time. I don't remember what the wallet was. It was a Bitcoin wallet. And the challenge was getting the money on ramp. And I just quit 80% of the way, and I never did it. And my plan at the time was just to drop $1,000 in it and leave it, as I do with most of my investments, which I've done well. That's my strategy generally with stocks. I don't sell. I just buy. Unless the company's really, I've only sold, I work in banking, and I've only sold 2 stocks in my entire 17 years in banking.
Very nice. The Warren Buffett style of approach. Nice.
Speaking of which, Facebook is one of the stocks that I'm considering selling now. I just feel like we're at the end of an era. But this ties into NFTs and
okay,
the
go ahead.
metaverse.
The metaverse and meta. Go ahead.
So when I saw this crazy bubble forming, or what I thought was a bubble in NFTs, I decided I need to explore that. And after that, initially I couldn't get myself to spend $3,000 of my hard-earned money, non-crypto made money on NFTs, on a JPEG. And I thought at the end, if I just end up with a JPEG after 2 years when this bubble bursts, I'm gonna want to kick myself in the face for being stupid enough to spend that much money on JPEG. So I was very reluctant at first, but then eventually I spoke to my brother and my uncle, and we decided, they're like, you know what, let's just do it together. We'll just each put $1,000 and we'll go in and go buy a JPEG.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, sure. And but I told him, I was like, just know that you're financing my education. Like, this is probably not going to do well. I hope it does, but mostly you're going to be financing my education.
Sure.
And I started exploring the space, and the more I did, the more I realized that this is not at all about the JPEGs. Art is such a small part of NFTs.
Yeah.
The Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, is not about the JPEGs.
The benefits that come with it. Yeah.
It's a membership.
Yeah.
You are basically IPOing a community.
Right.
And a community that has a plan, that has a roadmap, that promises its members that they're going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And if by some stroke of luck, this community turned out to be successful, or people bought into that and they started buying it. Take the Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example. They did their initial mint. They sold 10,000 JPEGs that are computer generated, mostly. At least the features were hand drawn, but then it was put together with an algorithm. They sold each one for whatever it was, 0.05 Ethereum or something at the time. I don't remember, but let's say $500 a pop, 10,000 pictures. So they've raised $5 million to fulfill whatever plan they had shown to whatever roadmap they had shown to their members.
Yeah.
Now, because that project became so successful, there was a lot of aftermarket sales, and the price started going up, and people were buying and selling. And the beauty with NFTs is that every time it sells, there's a royalty that goes back to the treasury of the club.
Yeah.
So the Bored Ape Yacht Club, as of 2 days ago, have sold about $1.1 billion, with a B, worth of secondary sales.
Wow.
They make, I don't know if it's 7.5% or 10%, but let's assume, I think usually it's about 10%.
It's like $70 million of royalties.
Exactly. $70 to $100 million worth of royalties went back to their treasury after their initial $5 million mint. Now, a club like that can fulfill any plan they have in mind.
Yeah.
Once they've made this much money. So essentially, you're IPOing a community. And the owners of that community are the token holders. They're not equity owners necessarily, but they are voters in that community.
Yeah.
And that's what a DAO is, right? A decentralized autonomous organization.
Yeah.
So NFTs, in my opinion, are going to change the world. They're going to change the way we do everything.
Yeah.
And everything is probably going to be NFTs at some point. Does that mean if you buy an NFT, you're going to make a lot of money? No, probably not. 99% of the NFTs will probably go to zero eventually. But it's definitely something revolutionary that's going to change the world. But what I found the most exciting about that entire space is that, for me, getting into that path of spirituality and human design and Abraham Hicks and all that stuff eventually led me to Deepak Chopra and, Deepak and Oprah have this program called 21 Days of Abundance. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a 21-day meditation program. And Deepak, it's based on Deepak's book, which is called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. And he literally breaks down manifestation into 7 steps. Okay, starting with the law of pure potentiality, which can be reached by meditation. So this goes in with, this ties up with, and this is where I started seeing the links between everything and realized that it's all about oneness.
There's a
it's
common
all
denominator.
Saying the same thing in just different words that resonate differently with different people. What's his name? Joe Dispenza calls it the theta wavelength. So reaching meditation in a space where you can create with your mind. Deepak Chopra calls it the law of pure potentiality, which can be reached with silence. Abraham Hicks calls it launching rockets of desire. So it's through meditation. So you meditate, which is visualization.
Yeah, but does it all come down to sort of like have a vision, believe that you're going to make it happen?
That's step 1.
Yeah, okay.
That's step 1. So step 2, according to Deepak Chopra, for example, is the second law is the law of giving and receiving. And in order for you to activate, so you're creating an idea, a vision, a thought, you want to manifest something, it's better to make it a feeling than a specific material thing or an end goal. By just launching these rockets of desire, let's say, through meditation. And then to activate the flow of energy, he said the second step is the law of giving and receiving. And he says, you activate the flow of energy by giving. And this might sound counterproductive, but you give what you want more. So if you want more money, you just give more money, you donate, you contribute, you do some charity work.
Interesting.
If you want more love, you give more love. If you want more respect, you give more respect.
Like a reciprocity almost.
Exactly. Yeah. And that activates the flow of energy. The next one, I don't remember the order, but let's say it's the law of, so the law of pure potentiality, the law of giving and receiving, the law of least resistance, the path of least resistance. So you try not to swim against the current. You just allow the universe, just be in flow, be in that good vibration, that good frequency, and that good energy. Feel good, in other words, and embrace the curveballs. Allow the universe to guide your way.
Yeah.
Because the way we're wired, if we want to go from point A to point B and we visualize something, we usually draw a very specific path to get there.
Yeah.
And in life, most of the time,
it's not like
all
that.
of the time, you don't follow that path.
Right.
And it's important to be open enough to accept these curveballs that life throws at you and to embrace them, really, because at the end, when you look back, you're going to realize that you got to when you get to where you got to in a much better way than you could have ever possibly planned it.
Yeah. And so embrace the obstacles rather than try to maneuver around them.
Yeah.
And there's like another 4 laws like that probably. Yes. So ultimately it comes down to like, how can you...
So it boils down to abundance consciousness. This is like a big theme with them, is that there's enough, we were so programmed to believe because of society that there isn't enough for everyone. There's this scarcity mentality, which is a mentality of fear. And this goes back to conversations with God of fear and love, whereas a mentality of love or consciousness, abundance consciousness is all about there's just enough for everyone. And what I loved about the world of NFTs.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does this go back to NFTs?
So one of their main acronyms is WAGMI. We're all going to make it.
Oh, that's the first time I'm hearing that term.
Yeah, of course. WAGMI is like a huge thing in NFTs and crypto in general.
Shit, man.
WAGMI, we're all going to make it.
There's FOMO, YOLO, HODL, but like WAGMI is a new one.
Yeah.
All right, so WAGMI is that we're all going to make it, so we're all in this together. So any NFT community, basically.
Basically, we're all going to make it. All of us
all for one and one for
cryptos, all. It's not just that, because it's really about inclusion and not, segregation or it's.
But that's crypto, right? Because NFTs is a little bit about exclusivity too. I mean, isn't it? Especially when you look at the Bored Ape yacht clubs and shit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. It is more about crypto. Yes. WAGMI is more of a crypto term, but crypto and NFTs are the same thing. And what I noticed in that space, because for me to like dig deep the way I like to research things, I had to go in from the ground. I had to go on Discord, learn how to use that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been on Discord.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Okay.
But yeah, you need to learn it.
Spend time there, grind, chat. And like the more I went in, the more I started to meet people there and talk to people. The more I realized that they come from a complete, like this new generation, the Gen Zs, maybe some of the millennials as well, they come from a completely different mindset.
Right.
They're driven by purpose. They're not driven by profits.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
You're absolutely right about that. I mean, my nephews is a good example, and also my nieces. And like, I mean, sure, there might be entitled because they were born with without the need to survive, and so, but that's kind of an advantage because you're ahead of the curve, and life for you is beyond just about making money and so on. But you're right, the NFT, the sort of community and the belonging part of NFTs allows people to gravitate towards one brand, one cause, one direction. And NFTs is a good tool to bring those people together if they have a common belief, no matter where their differences are or where they are in the world, to just come behind one project. Is this where you're going at it with the NFTs, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's your IPOing community, a bunch of people that feel and think the same way, and yeah, there is some exclusivity there, I agree, but by and large, most of them think the same way.
Sure, yeah.
Right? Most of them think, what made me dig deeper into NFTs, because I'm trained as part of my career to avoid bubbles. Like I'm trained by education and by practice to avoid bubbles, right?
Yeah.
But what was a turning point for me is, I remember, so I've been telling my clients for a while that I've believed for quite some time that the markets are going to go up, that you should buy the market, you should buy stocks because the government printed a lot of money, and that's going to translate into some kind of form of inflation, and inflation usually starts with asset price inflation, which kind of sucks because people who have assets will be hedged against it, and people who don't will be screwed ultimately. And the degree of education today in the financial markets is a lot higher because of the internet, right? People are a lot more sophisticated. They know how to invest. They buy ETFs long term. Of course, there's always some degens that are just buying options and going crazy.
Yeah.
But by and large, people know that the right way to invest is you dollar cost average on ETFs, and that's it.
Sure.
Unlike back in 2000, the last time we had a bubble, because we didn't have a bubble in 2008. That was that was a failure in the financial system.
Yeah,
the last bubble we really had when
mortgage-backed securities specifically, right? I mean,
mortgage-backed securities were a failure in the financial system, right?
Sure.
Banks got reckless, sold too much mortgages, figured out a way to repackage them, got the rating agencies to give them a AAA rating, and then sold them to people that didn't know better.
And not to take it to a quick tangent, but one of the biggest things that made that disaster, that 2008 crisis, as bad as it was, is the fact that everybody was insured with AIG, and that's when it just all spiraled down, right? Because it could have managed to kind of survive that avalanche, but the fact that everybody was insured by AIG was a big reason why the whole thing just fell apart. But back to your point.
They had to build them out. In other words, they had to print money.
Exactly.
Because things really weren't that bad after 2008.
Yeah.
They just printed a shitload of money and bailed out everyone, basically.
Yeah.
But back to where what I was saying is that the last time we've really experienced a real bubble, was 2000, the dot-com bubble.
Sure, yes.
That's when people didn't know any better. Anything that had a .com attached to it, people didn't know what the internet was. At some point they thought Netscape Navigator was the internet. It was such a foreign concept that you couldn't wrap your head around, right? Yeah. So when I started seeing the whole GameStop thing happened, I was like, shit, like these kids are going to
own it.
They're going to destroy us, man.
Yeah.
Now we're entering bubble territory. If this company, GameStop, was the most shorted company by hedge funds, which shorting is a fucked up strategy to begin with. I mean, I don't even know how that's okay. Like betting on the demise of like another company, shorting a stock.
Yeah.
It's just so messed up.
Yeah.
But
just by energy, right? Because you're betting on a stock that you go down.
It's so messed up, man. It's like you're betting. You're benefiting from someone else's demise, basically. Like it's so messed up, right?
It's I mean, for every trade, there's another side of it. But I hear you. But you're grim if you're in shorting.
Forget about like futures trading and shorting. Okay, forget about that. Put that aside. But betting on finding a company like GameStop and saying that this is not worth $20, it should be worth $1. It should go bankrupt, and we're going to short the hell out of it because we're going to benefit from it crumbling. Essentially.
Yeah.
Is messed up.
Yeah. The only times I give them benefit of the doubt for the shorters and when they come up with a company that is like committing fraud, exactly.
Sure. Like
Muddy Waters or whatever.
Yeah.
Fine. But you're right. For the most part, it's just people trying to trade off people's failure and so on. Fair enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it goes totally against wag me.
Yeah. True.
And
Wagner feels like a dog command that the dog
So-
gives you, right? Like or something. Okay, but so NFTs, yeah.
so when I
yeah.
first saw that at the time, and I was like, and this, I have a client who's young, my youngest one, who's never placed a trade. He calls me one day and is like, Fares, buy me, I want to buy some GameStop. And I'm just like, I checked the chart. I had just realized what was happening, and I was like, wow, the stock went up from $20 to $200. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
there's no way I'm going to let him do that. Not as his first trade. This guy's never going to invest in his life again when this one crashes.
Yeah.
And I didn't let him do it. And, you know, it was a good move, I guess, at the time. But that weekend I panicked because I was like, shit, I got everyone invested in the stock market. I'm invested in the stock market. And now there's a bubble being formed, and that's scary. So I went on Reddit and I started reading about these kids and what they're saying. And that's when I realized that, wow, these kids are actually, they're programmed differently. You know, they are driven by purpose.
Yeah.
And a lot of these kids that were on Reddit were children of, had parents that lost their jobs in 2008
Yeah.
on Wall Street because of the financial crisis, whereas the CEOs of these banks walked away with $50 million bonuses.
Yeah.
And they had this rage against the institution. They wanted to, there's
Resentment.
injustice
Yeah.
somewhere, and they wanted to, you know, fix that. And they managed to short squeeze the hedge fund managers.
It was such a nice victory.
It's insane, man. It's a
Beautiful.
revolution. So that's when I realized, I was like, wow, this is a revolution in the stock market by some people that are doing this for the right reasons, that are not driven by profits, they're driven by cause and purpose.
Yeah.
But that gave me a newfound respect for these children. They outsmarted the hedge fund industry,
Yes.
right? If
Yeah.
it wasn't for Robinhood pulling the plug on them, which exposed Robinhood, and that, you know, they're selling, you're front running basically
Right.
the
Deal flow.
the deal flow, and
Right.
you're front running all of your customers. Essentially, that's why they're getting a free trade. Which, I mean, we should all wonder, whenever anything is free, it means we're the product.
Yeah.
Right? But still, these bunch of kids with $500 checks managed to do what hedge funds do with probably $50 million checks behind closed doors, where they collude and they close. These kids did it in a public forum with, instead of, you know, 5 or 10 of these hedge fund managers, they did it with hundreds of thousands of them with $500 checks, and caused a short squeeze.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
And it wasn't just GameStop. It was AMC. It was GameStop
Yeah.
and a few others.
BlackBerry.
And then it took its way to Shiba. I mean, then the problem is that then you started getting things like Shiba Inu
Sure.
and Doge.
That's a whole other bubble. But my point is that it's commendable what they did.
Yeah,
you know,
agree.
and it made me realize that these kids, because for a while when I was watching, you remember Simon Sinek and like what was that movie called? Dilemma, the social dilemma.
Yeah, the social dilemma, I remember.
Like for a while, I was genuinely concerned about these kids, and I was so grateful that I lived in a pre-internet and post-internet era to be able to, you know, distinguish and I guess think of things differently. And I was genuinely concerned about the new generation, the kids, until I went through that experience, and I was like, actually, نحن المساكين يعني, you know, we're the victims of this. These kids grew up with the internet. Like we grew up with the Encarta Encyclopedia.
Yeah.
We got an update once a year if we were lucky.
Yeah.
They grew up with the internet. The amount of knowledge that they're exposed to means that they must be a lot more, you know, developed, informed, well-informed, especially with knowledge, right?
Which empowers the coordination between people and ability to beat the hedge funds as they did.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So they are a lot smarter than we think they are. At
Sure.
least.
Yeah.
And so when I came to that conclusion, and then I heard about NFTs, I'm like, all right, I can't dismiss this as a bubble. There's you got to scratch below the surface.
Yes.
And the more I did, the more I realized, wow,
There's an opportunity
this
there.
is changing everything. And this is not an opportunity to make money necessarily. This is an opportunity to change the world, to change how we operate, to change everything.
As a governance model, you mean?
As a governance model, how would I put it? Like, okay, for example, I was going to talk to you about this earlier. Yesterday, I bought an NFT for a company called Rug Radio. Okay, it's by this guy, Farouk, who's become a big, he used to go on a lot of Twitter spaces, but now he's become a big media personality, let's say, in the NFT space. And if you go on, are you on Twitter?
I don't create.
active.
I don't tweet. I just watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I always had a Twitter account, but I was never active. Now I spend a lot more time on Twitter. I don't tweet necessarily. I retweet stuff sometimes, but I'm not a content creator in any way. But I do spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I've realized how much people use Twitter, how many forums take place on Twitter, and how many of these NFT conversations are so, they tie into my spirituality as well.
Oh wow.
Like they're all based, these communities are based on, whether it's WAGMI or just this evolution of humanity.
Yeah.
The betterment of everyone, basically.
The power of the collective.
Yeah.
And but it is a tool, right? It's a technological tool. It's a coding hack almost that allows certain movements to happen and certain things to take place in humanity through the use of non-fungible tokens, which is, why did this not exist before? And why did we need NFTs? Was it not possible before to create memberships or to coordinate amongst your fellow community members? Surely there's something about NFTs that makes it transparent and decentralized, that gives a little bit of credibility to any movement. And so, let me ask you: in what way do NFTs? Like, what are some of the thoughts that you think about? What are some of the ideas you think about that can be achieved through NFTs, and then it's beyond just digital art? Like, what are
so much. I have a bunch of ideas in mind that I'm not I've generally been, my curiosity level ends at investor. I like to look at things that are interesting. I was never curious enough to create anything. I like to let others create, and I'll just invest if I think the idea is good, because I think that's where my skill set lies.
Because you're a projector.
Well, because I'm a generator.
A generator, sorry.
No, it's really because, so I'm a 3-5.
Yeah.
Okay. We didn't talk about that, but I'll tell you just very briefly what a 3-5. A 3-5, a third line is my conscious personality. A third line is the line that wants to experience everything in life. The line that believes that I'm here to try everything on the menu of life. I call it the line of the experiencer. A third line is a kid that's most likely, as a child, is the most likely to put his finger in an electric socket more than once just to make sure he understands what happens.
Wow.
Okay, that's a third line, the trial and error. It's all about trial and error.
Yeah.
And that's my conscious personality, and that's definitely how I see myself. My fifth line, my unconscious personality, and it's more the way people see me, but I also see it in myself just a bit less, is I call it the line of the influencer. And that's your first line, by the way.
Okay.
So this relates to the both of us. This is where we can connect.
We have that in common.
This is where we can connect as well. This is where we can get along. The fifth line, I call it the line of the influencer. And the line of the influencer means I'm not someone who likes to mentor people. That's for a sixth line. Sixth line is the line of the role model. They like to mentor people. I like to learn practical things, and things mostly as a result of my third line experiencing everything, and share them with people. But not enough to like teach you about human design, for example, but just enough to nudge you in a certain direction.
Wow. Okay.
Enough to influence you.
Right.
And to make you think, to send you on a path to go and discover it and explore it on your own.
Wow.
That, a 3-5, perfectly, for anyone who knows me, perfectly describes me.
This is amazing because it reconciles, but then bring it home to NFTs.
Wait, I'll bring it home to
Yeah.
You're a 5-1, okay? Just to tell you very briefly.
Yeah.
So a fifth line, the way you see yourself, you are all about learning practical knowledge, new things,
Yes.
and sharing them with people.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the reasons you have this podcast.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah,
You don't want to go in depth and mentor and tutor people. You don't want to do that, but you just want to share them and send them on share the knowledge, right?
True.
Your first line, 5-1, your unconscious, the way people see you, the first line is the youngest line out of the 6. It's the line of the eternal student, the one that has an insatiable thirst for knowledge and curiosity, the one that wants to learn about everything.
Sure.
Basically.
Yeah. True.
And that's more how you can relate to that because
100%.
it's in your unconscious, but that's more how people see you. People probably see Yazan as the guy who wants to learn about everything.
True. Very true. Yeah. Okay, but then bring it home to the NFTs thing. Yeah.
Bring it home to the NFTs.
Because like your fascination with NFTs and how it fits into your spirituality, is it because of what it can allow us to do Is it because of the possibilities that it opens? I mean, just that alone is for you a reason. It is a good reason. I'm not saying it's a bad reason, but like the endless possibilities that NFTs can give us as humans beyond digital art and collectibles, that gives you this kind of new fire in your life.
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, I was in Saudi Arabia recently.
And
Oh
yeah, you were talking about that earlier.
Yeah. And I grew up in Riyadh, so for me, that's home. But I grew up in what I called Riyadh 1.0, which was essentially the dark ages of Riyadh.
Yeah.
Okay. And my last trip to Riyadh before this one was before COVID. And that's when I witnessed Riyadh 2.0. And this is the post-MBS Riyadh, basically, where it was opening up. And, I just thought it's the thing about Riyadh is that the people there are amazing. And anyone who lived there or grew up there or even visited and hung out with the locals, you'd realize that the bonds you create with people there are amazing. And Riyadh 3.0 is kind of the evolution where that evolution moved from people who were mostly exposed or traveled and stuff to across the board everyone. Okay. And Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, is so prime for NFTs because people there is this subculture that's emerging that's kind of anti-establishment to a certain extent. Anti-establishment is a very common theme with all millennials and Gen Zs, I think everywhere in the world.
Sure.
But because the old system of the world is actually broken, and they have the foresight to see that.
Yes.
That it's broken. And because they grew up with the internet and they got there's this weird common denominator of new generations that has a lot to do with the internet. That's why you can go and chat with someone who grew up in Australia and really connect with them in the way you think today, a lot more than your parents could have connected with someone who grew up in, I don't know, Australia or wherever, Timbuktu, back like 20 or 30 years ago. Why? Because our generation of people grew up with the internet. We got some kind of global exposure through the internet.
Progressive
We think the same way.
Sure.
We think the same way.
Yeah.
And our thinking is very much influenced by the internet. Globalized the way we think.
Yeah, true.
We got exposure to each other across different countries without even having to travel. Many of us did, but even the ones who didn't travel.
Just by virtue of content consumption.
Of course.
That was
exactly
catalyzed on the internet.
Social
it was Hollywood
media
at one point, music and movies, but then internet just made it much more. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you're making a very interesting statement. You're saying that Saudi Arabia is prime for NFTs because of this kind of like a obvious establishment, overly conservative.
It's because it's all about community.
Right.
There's a subculture, this community of people that want to be, together. And if you create, and you need a way to like sort of filter, they want this like sense of belonging. So if you create NFTs to bring them together, where holders of these NFTs are part of that membership or that community, then
100%. We were having a chat earlier, me and you met Georgia and one of Yazan Barghouti, who was on episode 16 the other day, about how like you can even create a philanthropic, altruistic, almost initiative that is NFT enabled, because then it allows people to come together for a cause. And because crypto can be holding worth financial value, potentially you could also make use and utilize the yield off of that crypto for philanthropic and altruistic initiatives, because NFTs and DAOs and decentralized autonomous organizations allows you to kind of come together with other people that you've never met in your life and achieve a certain goal. We were talking about philanthropy and altruism because that was like one of the things. But yeah, actually anything really, right? You can just combine anything, right?
Anything.
And this is why
that's the thing. I mean, they talk about like, I think 13 different types of NFTs. We're still at the early stages. So today it started with, in my short time in NFTs, which in NFT land is a long time, but in real life, it's just like 4 months.
If you've done a year in NFTs, you have a PhD on it.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, they say that all the time. Like 3 weeks in NFTs is literally like, 6 months or a year in real life.
Yeah.
But because things move so fast. And why do things move so fast? Because it's open source. In
Right.
crypto in general, it's open source, right?
Correct.
So what does open source development mean? It means that you do not need to solve the same problem more than once. And when you compare that to the old world,
Yeah.
okay, the traditional tech world, for
Web
example.
Web 2.0 or Web 1.0. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, Motorola were the first company to come up with the fingerprint sensor on a phone in 2011, I think. It took Apple 2 years to come up with Touch ID because Motorola never shared their code. They locked it up. Apple had to solve that problem all over again from scratch. It took other mobile phone operators. It became a standard on mobile phones about 3 years after that. In open source development, you're sharing that code with everyone else. So you're solving every problem once.
You're building
So
on
you're
top.
building on top.
Yeah.
So that's why the speed of development is so much faster.
It's such an amazing thing because that means we can get to point A to point B, or I guess in our human timelines, it means we can get from point T to point X in much faster ways because we can leverage a non-patented, non-confidential advantage and just improve on it. But then what it does, because we were talking about this with Yazan Barghouti, is that it creates low barriers to entry. So suddenly anybody and everybody can do. The moment something is, the moment an innovation is discovered, everybody's doing the same version of that innovation. They're forking level 1 blockchains. They're copying Ethereum into something else. So it almost creates an abundance of supply and everything that is contradictory to digital scarcity. Just because you can create anything 10 times of it, and you can, so every single NFT, even Bitcoin, claims digital scarcity and or some form of novelty. But because it's open source, you can just do the same version, update it, hijack it, do a little bit more better marketing, and that's kind of why you have Shiba Inu and Doge and all this shit that is just copying previous blockchains.
Well, I mean, I think that's why Bitcoin will always be the store of value. It'll always be gold, right?
Yeah,
or the equivalent of gold, because I think gold in our world is really meaningless.
Right. Yeah. It's just what we agree to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. It's like a legacy thing that people thought has value, and because everybody thinks it has value, it has value.
Yeah.
Until they stop.
Even though it got forked a million times, right? So there was Bitcoin Diamond, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Cash. There was
I'm talking about traditional gold.
Right. I'm just saying even Bitcoin as the alternative to gold had a bunch of different Bitcoin versions.
Yeah.
And then through agreement between people, through a strong community, through a strong consensus, Bitcoin, what we know as BTC today, the what is it, $44,000 coin that exists today, has a bunch of other copied versions of it, right?
Yeah.
We just all happen to agree that this is the one that we're going to stick to.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, as a proof of work consensus mechanism, Bitcoin is the
you're right.
Right, the OG. Although Ethereum is still on consensus, but if you were to send, because there's that trifecta, I guess.
Trilemma of blockchains, yeah.
The trilemma, sorry, where you don't want to compromise security for speed or scalability. And you have, so if someone's going to transfer $100 million, for example, they're probably going to want to do it over Bitcoin, not over anything else, because security is important.
Correct.
That big. But then Ethereum and all the smart contract related stuff will create the use case or the oil, basically.
Sure.
I mean, I guess I don't need to.
Yeah, but NFTs. So NFTs, there are a couple of like blue chip projects. The Bored Ape Yacht Club, the CryptoPunks, Kitty ones, whatever the hell they. CryptoKitties. Yazan had bought some into Fly Frogs. So like the way that what will drive one NFT project or community or whatever you want to call it to be relevant and exist will come down not to the technology, because that is ubiquitous and as you said, open source.
The community
and the club and their values and their ability to keep that the conviction and the transparency and the ability to come through with your promises and not to have a rug pull and all that shit. Right?
But that's another beautiful thing about the blockchain, is that it is very transparent.
Yeah.
Right? So when somebody tries to rig something or change something, they are immediately exposed.
Yeah.
Immediately exposed.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's incredible. Look, I think so. In my short time in NFTs, I witnessed the first boom was generative art, which is art, which makes the most sense, right? It's art ownership of digital pieces on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And then it became PFPs, which is profile picture NFTs, which are essentially membership clubs membership club cards, basically, to a community.
Right.
And then you had these gaming NFTs, where you're essentially, it's a play to earn game, and the only way you can participate, because gaming evolved from pay to play, which is when we were young, right? So you buy a card, a CD-ROM or whatever, and you play the game, and that's the only time you have to pay, to free to play, which is first. Like Fortnite, for example, and stuff like that, where you didn't earn any money, but you can play the game for free, but then you can buy skins or whatever.
Sure.
To play to earn,
right?
Where you're actually getting paid for playing the game,
like Axie Infinity,
like Axie Infinity.
Yeah,
exactly. So, so in a play to earn model, there has to be a buy-in. So if you want to take it back to poker, an example that anyone can understand, because Axie Infinity is a little tricky for a non-crypto native to understand.
Yeah.
But poker, there is a poker table in Decentraland, which is one of the metaverses, where in order for you to be able to get on that table and play, you need to buy an NFT for your avatar. So you either have to wear and there's like five different options. So you can either have to wear like a robe, like a Hugh Hefner kind of robe that you buy for your avatar.
Like a flashy pink.
Yeah, like a red silk robe, basically.
Yeah.
Or a captain's hat, or these like fancy leather slippers, for example.
Right.
You have to buy one of these NFTs, and they cost you about $500 to buy them.
Just so you can get on that poker table.
That gets you on that table, right?
Wow.
So exactly. So
wow, yo, so cool, man.
Yeah.
And I mean,
then you can earn by playing poker, for example.
Oh, that too, right? But
your buy-in is this NFT.
And it's not any pair of slippers or any robe. It's gonna have to be
what was it called, DG, the Central Gaming or something. I can't remember what it's called exactly.
Yeah. Listen, the NFTs as a key to a community, as your membership card to a fraternity, or whatever you want to describe it as, an analogy, is a brilliant concept. And a few, there many more come to mind, and I've heard about them or learned about them, is like fractional ownership of real estate. Today you don't have to pay $1 million to own a piece of real estate. You can just buy 100th of that piece of real estate through NFTs that is tokenizes. It's just such a beautiful time to be alive.
So this ties back into that concept of justice or equality, in a sense, right? So one of the things that I guess the blockchain is trying to fight is this whole accredited investor concept or rule in the US, where you cannot participate in, you cannot buy Facebook as a startup unless you are an accredited investor, which means you have to have $1 million in net worth.
Yeah.
Which, that law doesn't make sense.
Correct.
Because you could have someone who has $1 million in net worth but isn't knowledgeable enough to make an investment like that, and you can have someone who doesn't have $1 million in net worth that is knowledgeable to make an investment, and you're not giving that opportunity to all of them. You're giving it only to the ones that have money. Right?
Yeah, it democratizes access, basically, right? For anybody that has what they need, and the rules should not prevent them from taking advantage of a certain market or so on.
Exactly.
It's a great time to be alive, man. And so you're investing heavily in NFTs, or are you just fascinated by the philosophy of it?
I've come to conclude, like maybe a month into my journey, that I've had some, good ones, some good trades, and you can make 15, 20x sometimes, but you're making 15, 20x on like $500.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And you're spending a lot of time to get access to that $5,000 because you have to get that $500 because you have to get whitelisted in order for you to participate and buy an NFT. So if you're a kid with a lot of time and no money, sure, it makes sense. But if you're a bit older, I'd rather just drop a bigger amount in Ethereum or Bitcoin, and I can make that time without that money, without spending time. So financially, it has not been, for me at least, it has not been great. There has been some good ones, but
naturally,
but it's been more of a learning experience that opened my mind to what can be done with NFTs and what can be done. It's just
100%. I agree. It's a great time to be alive. So, dude, I have to say, is there anything else that we didn't cover that we should talk about in this episode?
I want to say one last thing, actually, on NFTs and the metaverse.
We'll edit that part back in.
So I was invited to like a little private conference a few days ago by a company that's trying to promote, investment in the metaverse through them. And they brought Jordan Belford as a speaker, the Wolf of Wall Street.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So for anybody who
And
doesn't know who Jordan Belfort is, do you wanna?
he's the Wolf of Wall Street. So
Right.
he's the guy that Leonardo DiCaprio played in the Wolf of Wall Street.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, Jordan Belfort can sell anything to anyone.
Yeah.
His
Sell me this pen.
yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Turn it into an NFT. But he said something that really impressed me, because I went into that presentation thinking I'm just gonna hear a crook that basically try to sell me something that I probably don't even need.
Right.
But I like the way he positioned the whole thing, and he gave an analogy that I've repeated several times since that presentation, which is, he was telling the story about how he showed up with his wife, his current wife, who's Argentinian, and he told a story about his ex-wife, who is Margot Robbie in the movie.
Oh yeah.
And in the 90s, he wanted to put his kid in the school, this private school in New York, and he had to make a donation to get him in, and he had to donate $3 million to get his kid into the school. So as part of the donation, he became part of some inner donor circle or whatever, and he met this guy called Sanjay. I don't know his last name, but people recognize who he was. So I think he was some hedge fund manager or something.
Right.
And he was saying how Sanjay, how his wife was so impressed by Sanjay, and went back home that night and said, why can't you be a little bit more like Sanjay? He's a good guy, she knew he was a crook, especially at the time.
Yeah.
And eventually so his ex-wife apparently used to she used to make clothes, but she just never sold them because she was not good at selling. But it was a hobby, and he figured it keeps her busy. So she came back to him one day and she's like, Sanjay told me I should start a website for my clothing brand. And this is in the 90s, right? And he just looked at her and was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what do you mean start a website for your clothing brand? Like, you're not going to sell clothes on the internet. And she was like, no, Sanjay said I should do that. And then I was like, no, it's like, look, if you want to waste some money and waste some time doing a website, go for it. But you're not going to sell clothes on the internet. That's stupid. And obviously he was wrong about that today, right? But the analogy he gave, and he's like, in the 90s, people bought domain names and sold them for a lot of money, made a lot of money selling domain names.
Yeah. Michael Saylor is one of them, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
And my cousin, I had lunch with my cousin today. He was telling me a story about this company that came up in the 90s, in like 97 or something, and was telling people that you can register website names for free through that company.
Yeah.
And it was a fraudulent company that was basically accumulating people's top 3 choices of internet names, and then they went and they registered all these names.
So they can like hike
so they
up
can
the
get
price.
ideas basically, and then sell them back.
Wow.
How crazy is that?
Yeah, fucking crazy.
So it's like people made a lot of money with website domains, and nobody knew what website domains were going to be in the future.
Right.
He says land in the metaverse today is the evolution of website domains.
Right.
That's what it's going to be.
Okay, so you're bullish on buying land in the metaverse?
I don't have any land. I struggle to think about like how to justify it, but now after this conversation, I'm starting to think that.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. We had a similar conversation, me and Yazan Barghouti, on 2 episodes ago. I'm a guy who FOMOs into anything that seems to have even just a little bit of hype. And if you give me some rationale behind it, like, take my money, where do I sign? But something about the idea of real estate in the metaverse, maybe I'm too short-sighted, but here's my problem with it. If I can code a beautiful park that overlooks a beautiful beach, and the ability to do that in the metaverse is as simple as like Wix.com or what do you call this website where you can create shit?
Wix.
WordPress, or like, if it gets too easy to design and develop land in the metaverse, so how can any land have, like today, for me to go to a beautiful place like Paris or Thailand or Mexico or I don't know where, I have to go through a flight. That land with this kind of sand and the beach and the sea and the view and the parties is scarce, it's limited. You have to fly. Like, there's a reason why land on Earth has value, because there is an inconvenience to experience that land. Otherwise, you have to take a flight and pay money. Like, it's not easy to go from one point to another point on Earth. But then in the metaverse, if everything is just a button away, you click a button on whatever headset you have on, and you can go to all those beautiful places. And actually, if you can't go to a beautiful place because you don't have the NFT for it, you can just go to another one that is exactly the same experience on your VR. Maybe you just grab a bunch of your friends. It just feels like it's very scarce. Like there's digital, sorry, not scarce. The opposite of scarce. Yeah. So it's abundant, right? So like you can just create anything out of anything. So the experiences that you can only afford in real life can be copied and pasted, and so that's why I would never be able to buy a land in real estate just because it happens to be next to Snoop Dogg's land in the Sandbox or the Decentraland.
So I think it's a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
Just as a website was a very difficult thing to grasp back then.
Yeah.
Because whether Amazon.com was Amazon.com or let's say Gap.
Yeah.
Whether it was Gap.com or Gap-US.com, what difference does it make, right?
Yeah.
If somebody who owns Gap.com and tries to sell to Gap, sure, they can't have that. They'll add a S before it or something.
Yeah.
Today, we know that that's not possible.
Yeah.
Right? Because people are just going to go to Gap.com.
Yeah.
It's probably one of these things that we can't grasp.
It's what we
today.
agree to. Yeah.
It's something that we can't grasp today, but I think location will probably play a role in the future of the internet.
Right. Even digitally.
Yes. So even digitally, yes. So if I'm going to go to a place where Snoop Dogg has a party, okay, I walk out and then there's next to it on that virtual land, there's a mall that sells something that's very attractive to people someone who sells, I don't know, memorabilia or some kind of fan.
It would have to be exclusive to being sold there, right? So then I'll have to pay a premium. Maybe it's an entry ticket somewhere in order for me to buy that thing that can only exist in the metaverse next to Snoop Dogg's mall or whatever. Because otherwise, if it's not exclusive to this particular pixel of land, then
yeah, but it's less about targeted places and more, I think, about exploring.
Right. With exclusivity, though, right? Like it has to be something that cannot be available anywhere else.
Sure, but it's also it's frequented. It's areas where you're going to go visit more frequently. So, for example, I wanted to try to understand the value because just like you, I thought land is finite on Earth, but online it's not. Like somebody else can create a server and or even Decentraland or Sandbox can increase their.
Yeah.
So why is it relevant? And I don't even need to physically transport myself to like the other corner if I want to go somewhere. I can just type it and go.
Yeah.
So yes, if I'm targeting a place, I agree with you. But if I'm exploring something new, it's probably a little different. And we can't wrap our minds about it. But if I'm a kid that's going to Gap, for example, now the space right next to Gap of for example, what's that other place? Banana Republic.
Right.
Okay, if I'm targeting Gap, I'm going to Gap, but Banana Republic was nowhere on my, in my mind. But Banana Republic happens to open a place in the metaverse right next to Gap.
Sure.
I'm more likely to go visit that place.
Just because in your vicinity of your 3D world or augmented reality, or
because I just went shopping at Gap.
Yeah, and in that headset that you're wearing, it happens to be right there. Like you just looked around in your headset.
Exactly.
Like you looked left, you looked right, you saw Gap, you went and you shopped.
Yani, for example, I started to better understand whether I should buy land in the metaverse. I wanted to go on Sandbox on Decentraland because Sandbox is still in alpha, but Decentraland is functional. I went on Decentraland, I walked around, I explored it, I found a casino. It was a casino, interesting. I went in, I checked it out. I ended up only visiting the 3 casinos that are next to the casino that I went to.
Yeah.
There are other casinos in other corners but I mean, I need to go scroll for them unless I know the name. Then I need to search for them.
Right. So
but I went to Atari Casino and I went to 3 others that are next to it.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
we might not be able to grasp it today because we target places on the internet, but once it becomes a metaverse, it's a different game.
So what you're saying is that like we should be bullish from an investment point of view on it, or are you saying more like is it more of a individual, non-investor, human perspective that this is going to change? Like,
I think from an investment perspective.
You think there's something there?
I mean, I'm not putting my money where my mouth is, but
not
yet.
Not financial advice. And
definitely not financial advice, but I do think that,
buying digital land. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Yani, Amnesia Ibiza has a place in Decentraland, has a club, and it's weird. And I went to it to check it out, but like I can't. ever
Yeah.
see myself partying there.
Yeah.
Right. But then again, I live in Dubai and I have amazing options just outside.
Yeah.
Right. But for somebody who lives in a weird village somewhere who doesn't have options, that might be a viable and
Yeah.
attractive.
Yeah. In my conspiracy theory world, I think that Facebook, and we saw that it plunged 20% because everything is stagnating on their traditional offerings. They know that we're going to spend more time at home going forward. Maybe because they know that there's going to be more COVID type shit that's going to hit us, or just that we're going to be more at home for whatever reason. And so,
Well, for work, at least for starters, we're probably going to spend more time working at home.
that's right. Yeah. And so maybe they did spend billions of dollars in R&D to discover that humans are going to just end up spending a lot of time at home, and they're not going to want to put on their clothes, and they're going to get fat, and they're going to put on their sweatpants, and nobody's going to want to go out and party and meet people like they used to be before. And the experience of being human is just going to be in a digital world. So they're going to for Facebook to go as far as rebranding to Meta, it's a big rebranding. Not just the Facebook app, that's an entire group, right? That's a huge decision. They must have really come to a very objective, and then Microsoft now got into it, and everybody else. So it's a good, I hear what you're saying about how it could be a good investment decision, but it's also a bit dystopian. Like it's a kind of a Black Mirror episode that we're living through right now. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Look, it definitely is, and I hope we don't end up in that dystopian scenario of Ready Player One, where we live in a dump, or some people at least live in a dump, and they just put on this headset and go into this virtual world that's just, that's like a step closer to the Matrix, right? Do you want to be red pilled or do you want to be blue pilled?
Yeah, exactly.
But I hope we don't end up there. I think it'll at least start with somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's less VR, more AR and augmented reality, where we're merging the physical with the digital in a way.
That's what Yazan Barghouti was saying, by the way. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Just because the VR experience is far more.
I don't remember that.
It's a very cumbersome experience to get into VR, right? You have to put on this entire thing over your head. So the more
it's too isolated.
But also the more accessible way is probably going to be the one that allows you to just experience that world with the least amount of hardware on your body, and that's probably going to be AR, not VR. Yeah. Good.
I mean, and look, the way they do it as well. I mean, I was watching this thing about Bored Ape Yacht Club. So your Web 2 wallet, your Web 3 wallet, is going to be your passport to the metaverse.
Right.
It's going to be your login. It's going to be everything.
Your digital identity.
Your identity, exactly. So that's why I think. I don't know if you bought a .eth account or a dot.
Yeah.
Okay, you should.
Yeah,
you should probably do that. Yeah. And simply because it's just going to be your wallet. It's not going to be a domain. People are buying the stuff thinking that it's going to be the domain of the future. It's not going to be the domain of the future. The domain of the future is probably going to be land, but it's going to be your identity. And for somebody who holds a Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, that visits a certain space in the metaverse, whether it's a website or it's a virtual space, or it's a physical space, even in real life.
Yeah.
So imagine you go to Dubai Mall, you walk into a store, you're wearing your AR glasses, Apple Glass or whatever it is.
Right.
And suddenly, because of the NFT that you hold, you have access to a different line of products that you can purchase. And you walk
exclusivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exclusivity. You can see certain things that only you can purchase
by
virtue of being a holder of this NFT. And even in a physical place, they'll give it to you in physical life. And this is where the world is going to move from NFTs that currently come with digital privileges to physical privileges.
And even I was thinking the other day, the gig economy and renting out assets that you own whenever you're not utilizing them, like we do with Airbnb and other things. In NFT world, maybe you can also lease out your privileges, your NFT, whenever you are not using them, right?
I was just listening to a podcast today about this. I told you there's a podcast that went and they NFT'd.
Oh yeah, you were mentioning that earlier.
Yeah, WGMI Studios. They NFT'd. You only have access to the podcast if you are a holder of the NFT. And this podcast is supposed to share alpha about NFTs and where to invest your money.
But explain what alpha is for people who don't know.
So alpha is
an edge.
Knowledge that will help you make more money than people who don't have that edge, basically. So they were talking about a wait, what were you saying?
Like how people can release out their NFTs.
Yes. So they were talking about a platform that allows you to lease out your NFT. So think of a membership.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say we turn this podcast
Yeah.
into an NFT membership,
Yeah.
and only people who have that membership can participate,
Sure.
right? Can listen to these podcasts. As a whole, now you've turned it from a annual membership, or like a model like Patreon, for example, to a one-time payment.
Yeah. Pay as you go almost.
No, you pay it once.
Yeah.
You buy the NFT, you pay it once. You can use it as much as you want. You try this, you listen to this podcast. 3 months later, you're like, I'm over it. I'm not into it. Now you can sell that membership again.
Yes.
And you can recoup part of your money. And you, as the host of this product, will make money on the secondary sales, on the royalties. And the newcomer can come in and buy it at the fair market value, whatever.
So fucking exciting, man. And you can sell it flat out, or you can rent it out.
Or you can rent it out.
Yeah,
So that company, what they're doing is they're renting out roles on Discord, because roles on Discord will give you access to certain channels that can give you information or alpha or whatever. There are companies that can rent out a role on the internet, on through an NFT.
Dude, what a time to be alive.
Yeah, man. I'm telling you, and it's moving so fast. It's unbelievable. Like Jordan Belfort was saying, he thinks it's 10 to 15 years away before this really goes mainstream. I think it's like 3 to 5.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows? My God. Well, one thing I would advise people who are listening is, as far as the investment is concerned, is whatever you choose to put your money in, NFTs, digital real estate, Bitcoin, Ethereum, just don't trade it. Just buy and hold. Buy and hold.
100%.
I mean, don't bet the farm on something that's gonna emotionally trigger you to make decisions irrationally. But whatever amount you're gonna put into a topic that excites you, give it enough time.
Look, and always do something that you believe in. This is very important, I think. And I try not to say this as a financial advisor a lot, but this ties into human design and law of attraction.
All right.
I remember meeting a client in Saudi once, many years ago, and he was referred to me by other clients who were my clients for some time, and they were happy, and they were like, you should meet this guy. And I went to that meeting. I didn't know him. I went to that meeting, and the first thing he told me is like, Fares, ana hazzi khara. Like, whatever I invest in does not do well.
Yeah.
And he was so confident the way he said it, that it kind of frightened me for a second. And I didn't at the time. I don't think about this stuff. So I was like, whoa, like, is this guy going to jinx my luck? And, make...
Law of attraction?
Yeah. No, well, I didn't even know about the law of attraction at the time. But I was like, is he going to jinx me? Like, he was that confident. He was that sure of it. Yeah. Today, if someone tells me that, I'll tell them, all right, cool. Just like, do your thing.
Yeah. You do you.
But at the time, I was like, wow, is he going to jinx me? But then I was like, well, what do you mean is he going to jinx me? That's ridiculous. That doesn't make sense. So I'm like, no. I was like, خلاص جرب حظك معي, maybe it'll work out. And I went. The way I do business is, the bank we have a list of things that we find interesting, themes based on research. And usually I pick my favorites and I go and I show them to clients in meetings. And people usually choose most of them. But then the different percentages are dependent on their risk profile, right? So I go to one of these I go on one of these trips. I show the products that I thought were interesting. Everybody invests. He's one of them. And then 6 months later, I go back to Saudi again, and it's time for a follow-up. And I walk to the first meeting, and it's all good. 6 months was too short of a time, for us to judge the return, but it was positive. I say up to 3%, something like that. And I walk into the second meeting, and it's the same thing. And the third meeting, and the fourth meeting. And then I walk into his meeting. And I was shocked because I opened the statement, and I hadn't checked it before because there are usually no surprises. I invest in the same stuff for everyone, just different proportions. And I opened the statement, and I'm like, what the hell? Everything is red.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is crazy. Not that red. He's not losing that much, but he's down. Like when everyone's up 1 or 2%, he's down 1 or 2%. And it's obviously I didn't put the orders for all of them at the same moment. It happened over like probably 1 or 2 days, but it's around the same few days.
Yeah.
Like they're not significantly different. But to, his luck, everything was red. And I just had to think, I thought about it. And I was like, wow, this guy must have attracted his own luck.
Okay.
It makes no sense otherwise.
Is that what happened, or was he like trading it instead of?
No,
Oh, he
no.
actually
He
just
bought it with
attracted bad
everyone.
luck,
He just actually believed he's not going to do well, and he didn't
and
do
it
well.
manifested.
Yes.
He didn't like do impulsive short-term decisions
Nothing.
to get in, get out. Maybe
He did the same exact thing as the guy in the meeting before him and the guy in the meeting after him.
My God.
The exact same thing.
So like there must be some,
There must be some element of that law of attraction. So my point is that, as crazy as this might sound, but you have to believe in what you invest in. You have to.
or anything else that you're doing for that matter. Commit to whatever you're doing.
And if you believe that something is not good for you and it's going to be bad,
Just get out.
avoid it. Avoid it. Just don't do it.
Interesting. Dude, thank you so much. This has been hands down one of my favorite episodes for sure.
Wow,
That's the kind
that's
of
a big
podcast,
statement, man.
bro. That's the kind of podcast I want to be having. So I gotta say thank you for coming. It's been years since I saw you. Basil, are one of my favorite people, one of my best friends. He set the bar exactly where, he set a high expectation and it was exceeded, even if not met. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm so glad you're saying that. I'm so glad he made this happen, and I'm so glad you followed up on it, because sometimes I'm just so terrible with messages. Sometimes.
Hopefully, no, you're good, and hopefully it won't be the last time we'll have you on the show. Probably after I become Joe Rogan and I don't get cancelled, hopefully we'll have you again, and we won't use the
No,
N-word.
you won't get cancelled. If you're gonna get cancelled, we're gonna NFT your podcast for sure, and we're gonna decentralize that.
Sure.
There's no cancellation coming.
Thank you so much. Cheers. You still
pleasure,
have any
man.
more drink left? Oh, wow, you caught it.
Wow,
Law of
you caught
attraction
it.
there.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.